The Ghost Specialist. By Incarnated Wisp. Genre, fan fiction. Completed. Strategy. Action. Adventure. Sam's team. Badges earned, 8, Mineral, Fog, Plain, Hive, Zephyr, Rising, Glacier, Storm. Approximate team strength, 8 stars. Typhlosion, Hisuian, Fire/Ghost type, female, timid nature and SPE/ATK. Abilities, Blaze. Held item, Charcoal. Moves, Tackle, Leer, Smokescreen, Ember, Flame Wheel, Curse, Will-O-Wisp, Incinerate, Detect, Quick Attack, Swift, Flame Charge, Flamethrower, Double Team, Infernal Parade, Confuse Ray, Hex, Shadow Ball, Nightshade, Shadow Claw, Agility, Blast Burn. Annihilopy, Fighting/Ghost type, male, impish nature and Def/Spa. Abilities, Vital Spirit. Moves, Scratch, Leer, Low Kick, Karate Chop, Fury Swipes, Assurance, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, Cross Chop, Curse, Brick Break, Rock Smash, Rock Slide, Bulk Up, Rage, Rage Fist, Close Combat, Shadow Punch, Drain Punch. Jengar, Ghost/Poison type, male, naive nature and SPE/SPD. Abilities, N/A. Moves, Hypnosis, Lick, Confuse Ray, Spite, Mean Look, Hex, Shadow Punch, Nightshade, Acid Spray, Ominous Wind, Shadow Ball, Dream Eater, Nightmare, Curse, Haze. Mismagius, Ghost type, female, hasty nature and SPE/Def. Pokeball, Friend Ball. Abilities, Levitate. Moves, Growl, Psywave, Astonish, Confusion, Confuse Ray, Mean Look, Nightshade, Shadow Sneak, Shadow Ball, Nasty Plot, Psybeam, Will-O-Wisp, Psychic, Hex, Power Gem, Pain Split, Mystical Fire. Trevenant, Ghost/Grass type, male, quiet nature and Spa/SPE. Pokeball, Moonball. Abilities, Harvest, Frisk, Developing. Held item, Citrus Berry. Moves, Horn Leech, Tackle, Confuse Ray, Astonish, Growth, Ingrain, Leech Seed, Forest's Curse, Shadow Claw, Phantom Force, Protect. Dragapult, Dragon/Ghost type, female, serious nature, plus N/A. Pokeball, Ultra Ball, shared with Dreepy. Abilities, Infiltrator, Developing. Moves, Astonish, Infestation, Quick Attack, Bite, Lock On, Agility, Double Hit, U-Turn, Phantom Force, Takedown, Dragon Pulse, Shadow Ball, Will-O-Wisp, Hex, Thunder Wave, Dragon Darts. Dreepy, Dragon/Ghost type, male, rash nature, plus Spa/SPD, partnered with Dragapult. Pokeball, Ultra Ball, shared with Dragapult. Abilities, Clear Body, Developing. Moves, Astonish, Infestation, Quick Attack, Bite. Auxiliary Pokémon, a gathering of Ghastly, a handful of Haunter. At home, non-battlers Shuppet, Duskull. At Carl's Ranch, Mankey, more than 20, Primeape, Annihilopy's brother. Chapter 171. Dragonair has shed skin to cure herself of status conditions. She's capable of great bursts of speed that can outmatch yours, and we can't ignore her dragon type, Sam said to Drawcloak as fast as he could. So, overall, expect a tough battle. Across from him, Reedy went through her own set of warnings to her Pokémon, and neither dragon type looked away. From atop Drawcloak's head, Dreepa let out a taunting cry. If his sister wasn't going to give her opponent a deserved taunt, then he would do it in her stead. But both sides were waiting for the other to finish before anything started. As Sam and Reedy finished their explanations, they sent one another a nod, and then they let out shared cries. Agility, into Thunder Wave, they yelled in unison. Through sheer accident, both Drawcloak and Dragonair shot forward while following identical commands. Their forms blurred as the psychic energy of agility carried them forward, and the two Pokémon met far above the field. They hurtled toward each other, aiming to clash in the air. Curving at the last minute, their bodies scraped against one another, sparks bursting off their scales. No Thunder Wave was used, and the Pokémon curved around for another go. The two dragon types once more threatened to collide but turned once again, barely missing each other but still causing their forms to swipe and create those same sparks. Thunder Wave! Sam yelled. You too! Reedy shouted hurriedly. Another direct charge saw the two Pokémon hurtle toward one another, but this time, they curved upwards instead of back and around. They rocketed into the sky, going almost as high up as the arena's brazier itself, until they finally pulled away and circled each other as if in constant threat. Still, neither of them used the called-for moves. Drawcloak had come out here to counter Reedy's Dragonair, but the only move Drawcloak had used had been agility to boost her speed. Similarly, Reedy's Dragonair almost seemed to refuse to listen to her trainer, not following any of Reedy's shouts for Thunder Wave. Honestly, Sam wasn't sure what was going on, but he got an answer as a new sound echoed across the field. The announcers' voices, which Sam usually tuned out as white noise, suddenly stopped. An unfamiliar click echoed throughout the arena, and a brand new person spoke up. Dragon types, that person said, speaking in a tone utterly defined by authority. The great monarchs of the sky. Rulers of battle. Their power cannot be underestimated, nor can their pride be damaged. Above, the circling stopped, and both Dragonair and Drawcloak locked eyes, staring at one another as the voice continued. Sam had intended to make use of Drawcloak's draconic instincts to fuel her desire to battle, but this reaction was so much more than anything he ever expected. When faced with a difficult opponent, the voice continued. A dragon type seeks to dominate. All dragon types seek to stand at the top, and it takes a certain type of trainer to earn the right of command. Of course, dragon types will always be willing to be commanded by those they respect, but there will also always be exceptions to following orders. In the case of a pair of dragon types, equivalent in so many ways, facing off in front of such an enormous crowd. The speaker momentarily went quiet. Even more so than usual, expect to see these two dragon types give it their all. I advise both trainers to continue this battle with as much strength as they can muster, but also, I highly encourage you to not disrupt this match. The mic clicked off, and the arena entered the strangest frenzy Sam had ever heard. He wasn't sure if they wanted to scream in excitement or stay quiet after hearing that voice. Both Drawcloak and Dragonair remained high in the sky, and a microphone clicked on again. This time, the usual announcers returned, and one awkwardly cleared his throat. That was Champion Lance, he said. Neither Pokémon bothered to resume the battle as they patiently waited for their trainers, even with their refusal to use Thunder Wave. Sam looked over to Reedy. She stared at the two Pokémon for only a few seconds longer before bringing her gaze back down to meet Sam's. They won't listen to our commands as long as we call for weak moves, he said to her. Thunder Wave wouldn't give them the chance to fight. They've already tested each other with their bodies, and now they want to use real attacks. Ha! Really? The one time I called for a status move, Reedy exhaled, half annoyed, half amused. Well, that works well for me. But I guess the question is if it works well for you. Sam was about to respond in the positive, but then a mischievous smile crept onto Reedy's face. She looked at him excitedly, and Sam knew that she wanted to go through with something that had come to mind. She spoke up once more. Actually, you know what I think about this, Sam. What do you think? He asked flatly, playing along. I think, Reedy's expression suddenly shifted to one of utter delight. I think. Use Dragon Rush, Dragonair. Get around it with Phantom Force, Drawcloak. Sam then yelled as fast as he could. Dark, purple-yellow flames erupted across Dragonair's scales. Reedy's Pokémon swung its head down to accelerate to an incredible speed, hurtling straight at Drawcloak. In response, Drawcloak hissed, and she flickered to the side. She became nothing more than a vanishing shadow, her phantom force causing Dragonair to pass right through her. But Dragonair's Dragon Rush did not stop, and the Pokémon used its serpentine body to curve around at an extreme angle. It was able to meet the emerging impact of Phantom Force even as Drawcloak appeared behind it. The two moves slammed into one another, and the smoke created by the clashing energies exploded in a burst. The conflicting moves sent both Pokémon, already injured, hurtling straight toward the earth. Dragon Pulse! Sam ordered. Twister! Reedy yelled. As the Pokémon fell downward, they both attacked. Dreepa shot forward only to be thrown off by a spiraling Twister, but that same Twister was disrupted before reaching Drawcloak by him circling around to continue his Dragon Pulse to punch straight through it. Drawcloak tried for a sudden infestation, but a dragon breath burned right through it. Both Pokémon gave their equivalents of a hiss. As they neared the earth, Sam expected them to pull up at the last minute. They did. Or, at least, they tried to. Not wanting to run from this challenge, both dragon types held a shared glare until the very last possible moment. However, doing so meant they both broke away far too late, and they each slammed straight into the dirt. Dragonair! Reedy shouted out of worry. Drawcloak? Sam asked cautiously. Ready to announce a tie after that terminal velocity impact, the referee prepared his flags to call for dual feints, but that announcement never came. Defiant, Drawcloak and Dragonair both picked themselves up off the ground, slowly becoming visible within a cloud of dirt their impacts had created. Dragonair was barely able to lift her head, and Drawcloak could barely push herself off the floor. Yet, the challenge had still not left their eyes. Dreepy returned to Drawcloak's head, and once again, the two sides of the field growled. They could still fight. Double hit! Sam ordered. Extreme speed! Reedy yelled for a counter. It can't damage you with that attack. Focus on striking when it gets close. Wait, try to breathe out for a dragon rage when it tries to hit you. Reedy yelled. Now's the time for a paralysis, Drawcloak. No, you paralyze it instead, Dragonair. Though Sam and Reedy yelled their commands, counter-commands, and counter-counter-commands, nothing happened on the field. Both Dragonair and Drawcloak remained in place. Dragonair? Reedy asked. Dreepy, is your sister okay? Sam called out. Dreepy squeaked to acknowledge the question and tried to tap on Drawcloak's head to get her to snap out of it. However, she didn't do anything, and just like her opponent, she refused to look away. Doing so would only mean her loss. These Pokémon were dragons, just as Lance had said, and they had both found themselves a challenger to that claim. At no time had either of them fought with a true advantage, and more than anything else, they instinctively wanted to prove that they were stronger. That desire was what was defining this fight. However, there was more to them than just that desire. They were strong, they were powerful, and they were experienced Pokémon. Though she hadn't been with Sam for long, Drawcloak had spent years with her brother alone in Galar. Meanwhile, Dragonair might have been young, but she had trained under a dragon-type gym leader before being handed to Reedy. It was a known fact that dragon types needed a great deal of experience to reach their final stage. However, considering the extent to which Sam and Reedy had been pushing their teams, and given the ongoing stress of the conference, if it could work for a Kadabra, it could work here. Flickers erupted across the two Pokémon's bodies, and both cried out to push through. Duel, white lights overtook the field. Sam couldn't hear anything. The audience's cheers were far too overwhelming for any other noise to get through. Reedy was experiencing the same, and just like Sam, she was forced to bring up an arm to cover her eyes. Though the light was blinding, silhouettes were visible. Half-present forms changed within. On Reedy's side of the field, Dragonair's body expanded outwards, and her tail was drawn in. Limbs, arms, and legs peeled off of her, and she flexed her newfound claws while flapping the wings that emerged from her back. Drawcloak, meanwhile, stayed mostly the same, but that was only for her general shape. If Sam had to describe it, her form changed to be more, well, her. Her head thinned and widened, the wings on its side growing to assist with speed. She grew in size, but there was a sleekness to her. Everything about her shape emphasized acceleration. Her tail alone became twice as long as she had been before, and the tip of that appendage seemed to fade away into a spectral end. A barely visible dreepa crawled across her head to enter a natural launcher that was now part of her body. Then, two roars echoed out, and the shared light broke. Facing off, a pair of pseudo-legendary Pokémon faced one another. A bright orange Dragonite exposed its teeth in a grin at Dragapult, and Dragapult snapped out a scowl as she glared at her foe. Why does Dragonite's expression look like one of Reedy's? Sam mumbled. Why does Dragapult's expression look like one of Sam's? Reedy mumbled. They blinked at each other as the audience's cheers continued. As it turned out, Lance had spoken for a reason. He had recognized this situation and had given the best advice he could. And now, both Sam and Reedy planned to make use of this to their fullest. Attack! Came another set of simultaneous orders. Rejuvenated by their evolutions, the two dragon types rushed one another once again, lunging to meet one another in the air. This time, however, neither needed to use agility, and they met with an even greater speed. Practically vanishing to meet high above the field, Dragonite grinned while swinging one of its claws, and Dragapult zipped around her opponent to avoid that attack. In retaliation, she swung her tail, testing its capabilities, but Dragonite spun around to bash an arm against it in defense. Right away, it was clear that neither of them was used to their new bodies. Dragonite was using her limbs more like swinging clubs than actual attacks, and Dragapult was drifting to one side due to the uneven weight of only one Dreepy on her head. However, that only interfered with their fine control. Nothing about that meant there was any less power present on the field. Dragon Rush! Reedy yelled. Surround yourself with Will-O-Wisp. Then, Phantom Force again. Sam ordered. The Dragonite didn't hesitate to snap itself forward, not needing to build any momentum to throw itself into this move. Dragapult vanished in an instant, completely avoiding this attack, but the trap-like Will-O-Wisps she left behind were all burned away by the surrounding, draconic fires of Dragonite's move. Back! Sam and Reedy both then shouted. Dragonite pushed off the air to return to Reedy's side of the field, and Dragapult appeared again from the shadows to position herself above Sam's. The two pseudo-legendaries panted. Though their evolutions had empowered them, both were still injured from the first half of this match. We could do this forever, Reedy said with a sharp grin. Or we could finish the battle off here. Her shout was loud. She was speaking to more than just Sam. With a matching grin, Dragonite caught on to Reedy's meaning, and it shot far up into the sky just to bring its arms up above its head. A glow then built between its hands. It's just like Reedy to resort to such a big attack so quickly, Sam said under his breath, but then he looked back at Dragapult. Dragon Pulse, and pull back. Use lock on and get ready to dodge. As big as possible, Dragonite. Reedy roared. Take as much time as you need. As the glow built and built and built above Dragonite's head, Dragapult couldn't risk getting close. She dropped lower to the ground to slither through the air above it, keeping a close eye on her opponent. At a certain point, she pulled upwards to directly face her opponent, and then a burst came from her head. The screech of this move came out absolutely delighted. Dreepy had never travelled at such an incredible speed before. Not a dragon pulse, but a dragon dart. Sam mumbled. That's... I appreciate the new move, but Dragapult only has one Dreepy with her. Dragon darts is half as effective. Dragon pulse would have dealt more damage. But that was fine. She was getting used to her evolution, and the super effective, dragon-type impact from Dreepy still temporarily stalled Dragonite's move. However, the glow didn't stop, and even as Dreepy returned to his sister, the sphere grew and grew and grew. Then, Reedy finally called out this attack's name. Draco Meteor. This sphere was the ultimate dragon-type attack, something said to be a secret of the Blackthorn clan and the Blackthorn clan alone. No dragon-type trainer had ever figured it out on their own, and in a way, Reedy hadn't either. This attack was coming out nowhere near as fast as a proper Draco Meteor, but so much like her, she was having her Pokémon pour an incredible amount of energy into this attempt to brute force the move. Dragapult won't last through this. And Phantom Force won't let her hide for long enough. We don't have a defense. I could use U-turn to switch, but with what Lance said and with that meteor coming at her. He looked up at Dragonite and the barely stable sphere between its arms. Even if Sam tried to disrupt it, the explosion would still catch Dragapult. She couldn't even fly upwards to try to slip past it. Dragonite could just disrupt its toss, and there was no telling what tricks it might have to redirect its attack. Of course, there was a slight bright side to this. With how much energy it was pouring into this overwhelming attack, Dragonite would be utterly exhausted after its conclusion. Now! Reedy roared, and Sam found that he had no time to think. Dragonite threw its truck-sized meteor straight at the floor, and the energy moved surprisingly slowly. However, smaller spheres broke off of it to rain across the field. With how much those smaller projectiles spread, there would be nowhere Dragapult could go to hide, and there was still the problem of the biggest sphere slowly approaching the field behind them. In the end, there was only one answer Sam could find for this, and seconds seemed to stretch out into infinity as Dragonite's veritable apocalypse crept toward his Pokémon. How much do you value tricks over strength? He quickly asked Dragapult. She hissed. She wasn't the biggest fan, but she was a ghost type as much as she was a dragon type. For her, clever tricks were a kind of power. That was just enough leeway for Sam to create a plan. All right then, he said, and the entire field glowed orange from the incoming meteor. Use dragon darts, Dragapult. One last time. Quickly, and just like Dragonite, she caught on to Sam's meaning. A grin stretched across her face. Dragapult might have been stuck in place by the threat of the Draco meteor, but she wasn't here alone. There was at least one thing she could do, one other she could rely on. They were completely out of time. Though the smaller projectiles from Draco meteor hadn't done much, the main body finally hit the field and burst in an explosion worthy of the title of meteor. Dragapult became completely consumed by the light, but just past that fire, a high-pitched scream echoed out. Dreepy was launched with such speed that he completely outpaced the burst. Hurtling into the sky while Dragapult was consumed by the fires below, Dragonite was in no position to avoid this move. It tried to fly back to dodge, but this wasn't any move, this was a move guided by Dreepy. He curved the dart, and Dragonite had failed to dodge once. It wasn't prepared to try again. It was unable to do anything as the dragon-type energy was delivered straight to its face. "Are you kidding me?" Reedy blurted. "Atai. Even after all of that." The light burned away. A blackened Dragapult laid unconscious on the ground. After a second, Dragonite hit the earth with a thud next to her. "Nat," Sam said. Dragapult won. If she had more space than just this limited field, she could have escaped that Draco meteor. "What? That's not how it works at all. Sam, all battles take place on the same kind of battlefield." "What, you're trying to say you'd win if we fought in the woods?" "Yes," Sam said. Reedy looked at him like he was insane. "That's not a counter-argument. Just saying yes doesn't actually defend your position. And besides," she huffed, "Dragonite knows extreme speed. She could catch up, anyway." "Maybe for a moment," Sam said to counter. "But then she could just use extreme speed again." "But if you look closely, only Dragapult fainted, not Dreepy. And that doesn't count. Dreepy is a projectile under League rules. He's like a third of a Dugtrio's body. He doesn't count as being conscious if the rest of the Pokémon faints." Annoyed, Reedy crossed her arms, and Sam met her glare. They glared at one another before bursting into snickers. But that laughter didn't last long. Both of their Pokémon were fainted on the field. Dreepy returned to his sister and was unable to get her to wake up. Dragonite was completely out of energy after that dragon darts it took to the face. So that was that. Neither Pokémon was able to continue. Both Dragonite and Dragapult are unable to battle, the referee announced. "Trainers, send out your next Pokémon." "Oh yeah. We still have the rest of the match from here," Sam said. Reedy rolled her eyes, and they both recalled their Pokémon. "Sam, if you have any tricks with Destiny Bond planned, I won't be accepting a tie as our battle's final outcome." "Don't worry," Sam said confidently. "I won't be doing anything like that. A tie doesn't count. As far as I'm concerned, the only way one of us is walking out of here is with one of us as the objective victor." Reedy paused, raising an eyebrow. "Actually, Victor already won his match," she said. And this time, Sam was the one to roll his eyes. The Pokeballs containing the fully evolved dragon types were clipped back to their belts, with Dreepy resting alongside his unconscious sister. From there, Sam and Reedy sent out their next Pokémon Trevenant and Porygon 2, respectively, and then the battle continued. Here, Sam planned for Trevenant to outlast anything Reedy released. As long as he wasn't hit by something like that critical Night Slash, he could withstand any move. But even after what happened with their dragon types, Reedy was undeterred and unbothered by Sam's choice. No, she had already made up her mind about how the rest of this battle would go, and she went on to call for a specific move that would define every matchup from here. Trick Room. Chapter 172. Screen slid out from underneath Porygon in all directions. The blue ellipsoids at the sides of its body vibrated with power, and it thrust its beak into the air as it built the room. Reality warped. A breeze slowed, and the cheers of the audience became distorted. The Porygon 2 sped up without speeding up, and Trevenant's eye flicked around. His roots were already in the ground, there was no point in trying to stop this. No, this benefited Sam. Though Porygon would be sped up, it had opened itself to the perfect attack. "Leech Seed," Sam ordered. Reedy clicked her tongue as Trevenant swung an arm to fling rapidly growing seeds straight at where Porygon floated. Porygon, occupied, did not move, and though the flight of Trevenant's attack slowed, vines still stretched out and wrapped around their target before Porygon was back to an actionable state. Sam grinned. Now under the effects of Leech Seed, no matter how hard Porygon fought, Trevenant was going to passively heal himself while also draining his foe. Ice Beam, Reedy quickly ordered. A new move? Sam asked. Yup. Reedy replied. And we saved it just for you. Blue, crackling energy left Porygon's beak and snapped to Trevenant in an instant. The tree Pokémon hunkered down with his roots firmly in the field, taking that super effective move without even blinking. Porygon then zipped to the side almost as fast as Mismagius could move, and ice crept across Trevenant's body. He withstood the effects, but frost built on him. The super effective damage ate at his leaves until Porygon let its attack drop. Then, Ingrain healed him. Leech Seed healed him. A crunch, and a rapidly regrowing citrus berry saw most of that damage be undone. Again! Reedy shouted. 2 back-to-back ice beams could take Trevenant out. However, Sam had no plans to ever let that happen. Protect, he ordered next. This time, when the ice beam hit, the frost slipped off Trevenant's body like water rolling off glass. Ingrain continued to grant him energy, and green light from Leech Seed sapped energy from Porygon and brought it to him in return. With a growl, Reedy ordered another ice beam, but Trevenant disappeared from where he stood. Sam grinned as Trevenant appeared right behind his opponent a few moments later, but his use of Horn Leech to deal damage missed completely. Porygon shot up straight over him with a reflexive use of Magnet Rise. Wow! Protect and Phantom Force! Reedy said. I think I actually hate fighting your Trevenant. Stalling out Porygon's attacks, Trevenant had waited just long enough to be back at full health. Even if he took another ice beam, he would never take that critical, second attack too soon after. He could give himself plenty of time to heal thanks to both Protect and Phantom Force giving him breaks between every instance of damage. All of our setup, and it's like we can't do anything, Reedy said, shaking her head in disappointment. It sucks, but it's also fine. This was never going to be more than a test, anyway. With how Trick Room is going. It was a temporary effect. Even upon being formed, the panels that surrounded the field almost immediately started to fade. There were only seconds left to the reality warping change, and Reedy calmly leaned back. Another ice beam was blocked by another Protect, and Leech Seed meant Porygon started to flag. Recover, Reedy ordered. All of Porygon's lost health was returned. Now, use Trick Room again. Despite the long battle so far, the field had returned to the same state after the first turn. The Trick Room was back. Leech Seed was in place. Both Pokémon were at full health almost. Over that period, Leech Seed had drained more energy from Porygon than Recover had restored, and Recover was a highly energy-intensive move. Porygon was due to tire out first. But Reedy just grinned and met Sam's eyes. You've put me in a tough position, Sam, she said to him, and her voice came out as warbles thanks to the freshly warped field. With how this is going, I can keep Porygon out and lose, or I go back on what I said earlier and actually give you a proper fight. She tapped her chin. Choices, choices. She raised a single eyebrow before quickly grabbing a new Pokeball. Porygon disappeared in a hard return, and a replacement Pokémon hit the field. Thing is, all of this was just a test, she shouted. I know how annoying Trevenant is and I don't want to deal with that. And, besides, I never promised that I wouldn't swap. I just bragged about my strategy, and it worked to start off the match. On Sam's team, Typhlosion served as both his lead and finisher. With her Blast Burn, he considered her the strongest attack he had. Meanwhile, Reedy had an ace Pokémon of her own, and she almost always saved them for last. But that was not going to be the case here. Only halfway through the battle, Ursaluna appeared, the behemoth of a Pokémon landing and accelerating into a charge. Claw over foot, he hurtled toward Trevenant, and Trevenant was barely able to throw up a Protect fast enough to block the earth-shattering blow. Seed it! Sam yelled. Fire Punch! Reedy roared. The massive bear reared up, and Trevenant's mouth broke open to let him spit out a barrage of seeds. Vines extended out like tendrils, wrapping around an arm Ursaluna brought up for a defense, but Reedy's Pokémon just grabbed the vines and tore them away. Fire erupted to incinerate what remained. Under the effects of Trick Room, Ursaluna was faster than Trevenant, and his usually slow slashes came out as a flurry. For all the acceleration Trevenant also experienced, he was unable to stop the super effective assault that left scorch marks on his bark. But it could have been worse. He still had his freshly grown citrus berry. A devastating crunch echoed out from his chest, and everywhere that the juice dripped out of his mouth, his bark knit itself back together. You've made a mistake, Reedy, Sam yelled. Ursaluna is a ground type, and means that Trevenant is the perfect counter. Reedy merely watched in silence as Trevenant's claws slid right across Ursaluna's earth-brown fur. The trick room started to fade, but it was still present enough to mean the speed of his attack was that much better. As a ground type, Ursaluna took super effective damage from this move, and the increased power meant Trevenant was back at full. Ursaluna looked terrible. But Reedy. It was like she suddenly slid into view from behind Ursaluna's bulky body. A perfect counter, hey, she muttered. Ursaluna had taken that blow head-on and was still reeling back from the damage. However, his eyes suddenly snapped up to lock with Trevenant's own, and a nasty, fanged grin appeared on his face. All of the damage he had just taken was used to fuel this move. Pure, raw, dark-type energy was channeled straight into his claws. His full weight was thrown right into Trevenant. For all Ingrain did to help with healing, it also rooted Trevenant in place. He remained firmly lodged in the ground, and, like a punching bag, Ursaluna's attack sent his upper half violently bending back. Phantom Force. Reposition. Only appear with Protect. Sam yelled. Earthquake and hunt them down. Reedy shouted to her Pokémon. Phantom Force saw Trevenant disappear from where he stood in front of Ursaluna, and while hidden within the shadows, he crunched down on his citrus berry once again. As he appeared, a field-wide earthquake locked him in place by forcing him to use Protect, and then Ursaluna was right there on top of him yet again. Phantom Force. Sam yelled. Except, Ursaluna had one more chance to use another move, and he wasn't going to hold back. Shadows, extending from his claws, stretched out as he brought himself back up. Trevenant started to fade away, but Ursaluna swiped, and his attack tore right through Trevenant's attempt at escape. But Trevenant still hadn't fainted. Sam had trained his Pokémon to be tough for a reason. That, and Trevenant looked like he wanted to make up for his loss to Honchkrow. He was pushing himself. He refused to fall here. Unfortunately, there was only so much he could do. Bark broken, he looked up with raw anger in his eyes. This was not the same hatred that had once possessed him north of Mahogany Town, but it was dangerously close. However, he channeled all of that raw emotion into something brand new. Rather than allow Ursaluna to finish him off, dark flames burst across Trevenant's body. Pouring the last of his energy into one last utterance, he channeled everything he had into a curse inflicted on Ursaluna. Then, with a proud smile, he fell to the ground. Return, Trevenant, Sam said solemnly. Come out, Gengar. He moved quickly, he didn't want Reedy to switch. But Gengar never got to use Mean Look. Immediately, before either Pokémon moved, Reedy returned Ursaluna before Gengar could even think about landing that glare. Sam frowned. Weren't you the one to tell me that my team's great at finishing off injured Pokémon? He asked. Hey? Who said Ursaluna is injured? Trevenant did. Just now. Reedy cocked her head to the side. Yet? And do you think you're the only one who can use berries? Did you not see what we have hidden under Ursaluna's fur? Sam didn't understand her smirk. Even a citrus berry wouldn't heal that much. Citrus berries worked well for Trevenant because he could eat them repeatedly, but a single berry would never bring Ursaluna back to full. But then, a memory tickled the back of his mind. There was one thing he had witnessed in Reedy's match against Morty. Your sleep talk strategy, Sam realized. Yup. Reedy answered happily. It's too obvious, so can't use that here, but we can at least turn it around to have it help us for this fight. Ursaluna didn't have a healing berry. Ursaluna had a chesto berry. He could quickly slam that into his mouth, use rest, and then in an instant, he would be woken back up. And now, because you returned Ursaluna, curse won't be in effect, Sam said slowly. Trevenant had done all of that work only to have gained nothing in the end. Except, is that really the case? Porygon has used Trick Room twice now, and Ursaluna is seriously wounded. Next time Ursaluna is sent out, he'll have to use rest, and he'll only be able to eat his chesto berry once. If everything else lines up right. Sam looked over Reedy. She didn't look bothered. There's a chance that Trevenant won us the fight. Kangaskhan, Reedy said, replacing Ursaluna on the field. At this point, the Trick Room was gone, so the field was back to its standard. However, she still had her Porygon left, so Sam was distinctly aware that it could come back at any time. Gengar. We've already talked about this. Kangaskhan is your perfect counter, so be wary. But keep our plans in mind. As soon as the match resumed, Kangaskhan charged across the field, and it was surprisingly speedy for a Pokémon of its size. However, Sam had already seen this charge once before, so he was more prepared to call for Gengar's first attack. Acid Spray. With how well Kangaskhan could shut down most of Gengar's kit, his best strategy would be to set up Kangaskhan to be fainted later. Acid Spray would deal little damage, but it would at least eat away at a Pokémon's special defense. But it didn't work. As Gengar flew backwards across the shadows of the floor, Kangaskhan gave chase. For some reason, the massive normal type seemed to flag for a second, and when Gengar slowed just to laugh, it lashed out unexpectedly. Though normally ineffective, Kangaskhan's scrappy ability let its fake-out hit Gengar. Acid Spray failed, Gengar flinched. Now Dizzy Punch! Reedy yelled. Unable to escape the normal type capable of hitting him, Gengar pressed acid through his teeth to spray it across Kangaskhan's thick hide. But for all that his move ate away at it, Kangaskhan retaliated by clipping him in the shoulder, and he was sent spinning back across the field. Good, Gengar! Sam called out. Gengar was not great at defense, so this was probably the best outcome they could have hoped for. Though he had taken damage, his practice with Annihilape let him move with the impact to minimize the damage and allow himself to be sent flying back, and Dizzy Punch thankfully did not leave him confused. Although, I guess we don't have to worry about that anymore. Gengar isn't sturdy. Next time Dizzy Punch hits, he won't get confused, he'll just faint. Acid Spray. Keep it up, Sam said. You're aware of its fake-out. It can't use that again. Just like he had against Xavier's Noctowl, Gengar slid back across the ground, and he stayed out of range just to spray even more acid out from between the gaps in his teeth. Kangaskhan, of course, gave chase, but the limited space of the field meant it was slowly able to corral him into letting it catch up. Still, even though Acid Spray dealt negligible damage, Kangaskhan was becoming more and more vulnerable to special moves over time. But at this rate, Kangaskhan was going to land another attack before that could matter. As much as he hated it, Sam had a risky play here that he decided was worth the gamble. Will-O-Wisp. As soon as he heard the shout, Gengar threw his arms out wide to conjure a Will-O-Wisp, stopping any further uses of his previous poison-type attack. Mimicking Mismagius, flames washed out in a wave, and they caught the incoming Kangaskhan to sear its hide. However, the very moment that happened, Reedy's grin grew manic with excitement. The eagerness in her voice was obvious as she immediately gave the counter-command Sam was worried about. Facade. Knew it. Normally, Sam wouldn't need to worry about this move if his Pokémon were immune, but Kangaskhan could damage ghosts, and Facade was all about leaning into status conditions. It dealt more damage when suffering from a condition, and it would even allow Kangaskhan to ignore how a burn lowered a physical attack's power. Sam was forced to adapt on the fly. As fast as he could, he shouted for a last-ditch, hopefully win-win scenario. Make it stop, he told Gengar. Gengar knew what he meant. Kangaskhan's charge was half a lumber, half a dash. Facade made it look like it was more injured than it was. It was intending to use that unsure stature to let it strike with an unexpected attack, and Gengar slowed as it neared. As it arrived, Kangaskhan's form blotted out the sun above him. He was cast into the shade of the Pokémon's shadow. There, it looked as though Gengar was due to faint, but Kangaskhan's eyes suddenly widened. Before ever finishing its facade, it abruptly leaped back, having recognized what was going on. Likely having been warned by Reedy, it had realized their shadows had overlapped. Now that there was a distance between them, a dark line connected the shade under Gengar and Kangaskhan's feet. I thought you said you weren't going to use Destiny Bond. Reedy shouted out. And I thought you said you weren't going to switch. Sam shouted right back. Besides, who said I was actually not going to use Destiny Bond, anyway? I just needed a way to get your Kangaskhan to back off, and this worked. With the sudden drop of aggression, Gengar had free rein to launch himself backward across the field. He smiled, a massive amount of distance being created between him and his foe, and the shadowy string snapped as the Destiny Bond wore off. Annoyed, Reedy gave a new command. Hyper Beam. Ha! Really? You taught another Pokémon that? Gengar was forced into the floor, entering a shadow like he was so prone to do. Except, that wasn't enough to dodge. Kangaskhan dragged its laser downward, and all the darkness burned away. The hyper beam lasted a while, and when it stopped, Kangaskhan was panting. Sam knew that move was strong enough to feint Gengar. However, there was no sign of him, even now. Kangaskhan was forced to go quiet to listen in even as it stayed in place for the needed recharge. To that, Sam smiled. Good. That's the opening we needed. What are you planning? Gengar's specialty, of course. Hearing that phrase, Gengar exploded out of the earth, having had to use his ghostly nature to phase straight into the floor. Kangaskhan was surprised but was still willing to lash out, except Gengar's eyes flashed, and his opponent immediately fell. But early bird. Dream Eater. Sam interrupted. There was no time for banter. Early bird was a threat. While it didn't render Kangaskhan immune, it did mean Kangaskhan would wake up almost right away. Gengar only had time for this one move. Gripping his hands, Sam could only watch as Gengar dove. The Kangaskhan's child was already rustling in its pouch and getting ready to squeak. However, between the two of them, Gengar was much faster, and all of that reduction from acid spray gave him plenty of leeway to swoop down and pluck something glowing from Kangaskhan's head. His opponent let out a long exhale of a groan, and he merrily popped that glowing object into his mouth and chewed. Kangaskhan is unable to battle. Trainer Reedy, send out your next Pokémon, the referee called out. The baby Kangaskhan's head poked out, and it cried its name only for no reaction. Panicking, it pushed against its mother for no response, and tears welled in its eyes before Reedy quickly returned the two of them. That was cruel, Sam. It's on you for sending them out. I can't believe it. And now you're trying to shrug off the blame. She laughed as he rolled his eyes, and some members of the audience booed at him for making a young Pokémon cry. But this was the conference. Things like this happened. Both Sam and Gengar waved. And, knowing Reedy, Sam was pretty sure she was going to load up that child with treats later to make up for the battle. Porygon, Reedy named next, and her Porygon 2 reappeared on the field. Yeah, that's expected. There was no way she was going to send out Ursaluna with Gengar still capable of mean look. Reedy gave the expected order for Trick Room, but so focused on everything else, she failed to realize that she was using an extremely energy-intensive move while Gengar was still on the field. Honestly, Sam had so many tricks in his bag that it was hard to remember them all. Spite, he shouted. He had the benefit of being the one to constantly train his team. Come on. Reedy said as Porygon's energy was sapped away. How many tricks do you even have? Trick Room was set up, but this would be the last time it would ever appear over the field. All of Gengar's movement slowed to a crawl, but he was still able to send a sharp glare and a few specially worded taunts. Ghostly energy caressed Porygon, and it sapped away the energy reserved for this move. Trick Room could no longer be used, and Reedy was now forced to make a choice: send out Ursaluna here to make use of that speed, or leave Porygon out to not risk her best team member against Gengar. Alright, fine, she groaned. Whatever. You've made a mistake doing that, Sam. Yeah? How so? Gengar couldn't move that quickly, but he could still float. Even if Porygon zipped around in the air, he could attack from range, and the moment he got close, he'd be in perfect range for a Psybeam, Reedy ordered. With Trick Room up, Porygon released its attack in a flash, and Gengar did not have his usual speed to dodge. The move struck him straight in the chest, his secondary poison type making him especially vulnerable, and he fell right away. Sometimes, it's easy to forget just how scary your Pokémon's attacks are, Sam mumbled. Reedy stuck her tongue out at him, and he laughed. At least, Gengar had done his job. So many of Sam's Pokémon could move quickly that Trick Room was great at shutting down some of the best members of his team. But with it up, Sam had one potential answer to Porygon here. It was such an unusual choice that he doubted Reedy had many counters in mind. Annihilape, Sam named. Reedy took one look at the ape Pokémon and looked like she wanted to spit. Sam, do you even remember how Porygon likes to fight? Are you sure you're thinking wisely? I am. But let me ask you a question. Porygon might be a normal type that can float, but what moves does Annihilape know to let him attack from range? His Pokémon dug at the field. Shadow Punch, Reedy answered immediately. Unless you're talking about. Her eyes went wide. With a grin, Sam pointed forward. There was one thing about Porygon's magnet rise that Reedy had failed to notice. Though the levitation could shoot Porygon high into the air, it tended to never move around on its own after that. Rock Slide, Annihilape. Sam shouted. Batter it as much as you can. Teleport. Into lock on. And start spamming psi beams. Thanks to Trick Room, this exchange became one of rapid attacks. Porygon tracked Annihilape, unleashing bright pink beams. Annihilape was slow when compared to Sam's other Pokémon, but he was fast compared to Porygon. Hands in the ground, he dug up the field to throw a swarm of sharpened stones into the air. They were chucked straight into the path of the beam, giving Annihilape the chance to shift to the side and turn a direct blow into a glancing one, and then Porygon was forced to stop attacking to dodge with teleport. Honestly, it was a very strange exchange. Porygon wasn't taking much damage, but Annihilape was getting better at his timing. More and more rock slides battered his opponent, and Porygon couldn't use teleport that fast as a normal type. Though Porygon was winning right now, there was also a constant pressure to its actions. As much as Annihilape was taking damage, he was speeding up. Trick Room was wearing off. Sam could see just how much Reedy was gritting her teeth. It pained her, but she seemed to recognize how that shift would affect her chances. We need to take it out now. Use conversion. Speed up your teleports. Sam forced back his grin as pixels flipped across Porygon's body to turn it a deep shade of pink. Its psi beams came out more powerful, and its teleports became significantly faster, but as much as a threat it now posed, there was a problem. Reedy had just given up her immunity. Shift to Shadow Punch. Psi Beam. Break it apart. Annihilape threw a punch, and he launched a copy of his fist made of shadows. A Psi Beam pierced through it, Annihilape cartwheeled to the side to dodge at the very last second, and the shadows seemed to reconstitute themselves in the air. This was not like any physical move. Ugh, you teleport, quick! Porygon flashed away before the shadow punch hit it, but then Annihilape's arm twitched, and the fist changed directions in the air. It used teleport again to make more distance, but the move just continued. Shadow punch didn't miss. Annihilape could guide it to his target. Recover. Reedy ordered quickly. Porygon was hit, and it healed health. Annihilape drew back an arm, but Sam quickly called out, wait. Reedy, as fast as she could, gave the shout of conversion. Porygon was back to the normal type again. But now, it no longer had the benefit of quick uses of teleport. Rock slide, Sam said flatly. High up where it levitated, the stones jabbed into Porygon's body, and it was almost knocked straight out of the air. Reedy called for another psi beam, and Annihilape charged while drawing back a fist. Instead of just taking the attack, he punched it. His arm broke straight through. The previous use of rock slide had forced it downwards, and now, Porygon was within leaping range. Annihilape was a monkey, after all. With a single grab, he latched onto Porygon and used all of his strength to dunk it straight into the ground. Porygon too is unable to battle. Trainer Reedy, send out your next Pokémon. Annihilape stumbled as he landed back on the field. He had taken a lot of damage in the fight. He forced himself to clench his arms and fought to stay standing up. It took a second for Reedy to do anything. She stared at her fainted Porygon, and she stayed silent for what felt like ages. A few seconds passed. Ha, she let out. Ha. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Her laughter continued for a while. So you're telling me, that even after everything we did, even after trying to figure out every Pokémon on your team, you still have 3 Pokémon conscious while I'm at my last? That we focused so much on offense, but you're winning because you have Pokémon that can withstand that. She shook her head. That's unfair, Sam. You can't even send out one of your other Pokémon, just for me. And let Ursaluna knock out Miss Magius. Let his earthquake faint Typhlosion, he countered. No. We're in this position for a reason. I'm not going to underestimate you. It's the same as how you're not going to underestimate me. Reedy looked at Sam, and she laughed once more as a smile appeared on her face. As much as she only had one Pokémon left, her final Pokémon was her Ursaluna. The same Ursaluna who had gone blow to blow against Annihilape, who was now so injured on the field. The same Ursaluna who had managed to take out the defensive Trevenant so handily. The same Ursaluna who had trained with Typhlosion since the beginning and had at least an equivalent level of strength. The same Ursaluna who would be forced to use rest upon being sent out. With that opening, Sam planned to show Reedy the utmost respect and faint her Pokémon in the most ghost-type way possible. Reedy quickly returned Porygon, and when Ursaluna was sent out, he plucked a small object out of his chest fur. As soon as he popped it into his mouth, his entire body hit the ground. His rest healed him, and that same impact saw his jaw slam shut. The motion caused him to bite down, and the dry flavor saw his eyes snap open, awake. Even with his awakening, the healing energies of rest were still infused into him, and he was reinvigorated to continue the fight. However, doing so had given Anilope time to act, and he didn't need to do anything special. Shadows coated an arm, but this was not for a shadow punch. This time, there was no charge to meet in the center. They had already talked about this idea beforehand, and by having that spar at the start, Sam had already secured his win. After all, Anilope was satisfied with that initial chance to test himself, so he had no complaints when Sam called for this move here. Curse, he ordered. The very first ghost-type move that Anilope had ever learned, the very same ghost-type move that had first taught Anilope how to enhance himself, finished him off here. His shadowy arm dug into his chest, and hateful embers flicked across Ursaluna's body where he stared. Those embers would only ever grow over time. The curse that left Reedy's mouth could not be aired on television. She had no Pokémon left to switch into, and Ursaluna was now subjected to an ever-growing curse. We have to do this fast. Get to Sam's side of the field. Ursaluna charged, rushing straight ahead. With Anilope fainted, Sam swapped him out for Mismagius, not wanting to give Reedy the pleasure of using the field-wide earthquake to attack from range. Mismagius had levitate as her ability, after all. With such a lumbering beast charging her, Mismagius immediately darted backwards to make as much distance as possible. She was already bringing her arms out to be ready for whatever attack Sam called for. Will-o-wisp. Burn it, he ordered. Tear it to pieces with Shadow Claw, Ursaluna. Fueled by pain and desperation, Ursaluna was on Mismagius in moments. He didn't bother to dodge the incoming wisps, having been trained to lean into them to give himself the enhancement from guts. However, though the adrenaline was there because of the condition, that same condition limited his time on the field even further alongside Curse. Reedy didn't care. She was betting on guts to end this match faster. It was the same as how Sam was betting on Ursaluna's burn to ensure that the bear Pokémon fainted sooner than it otherwise would. Ursaluna caught up. Mismagius tried to flee with Shadow Sneak. A darkened claw tore her move apart, and she collapsed from the massive damage she had just suffered. Looks like Ursaluna is feeling the heat, Sam said. Both Reedy and the audience groaned. That moment was going to go straight into the nightmare bin. Across Ursaluna's body, the fires from Will-o-wisp seemed to mix with the energies of Curse, and the Pokémon looked to be alight with dark flames. Sam laughed even as he returned Mismagius, and he didn't hesitate to send out Typhlosion next, even with Ursaluna being right there on his side of the field. He didn't have a choice but to send her out here. Typhlosion was his last Pokémon. But this wasn't like the Xavier fight. He might have only had one Pokémon left, but that was intentional. Right now, he was in complete control. This was Sam's victory. Detect, he ordered. Shadow Claw. Reedy yelled. Typhlosion nimbly hopped back, and then she dashed to circle around. Smoke screen. Sam shouted. Earthquake. Reedy countered. An exhale, and an entire half of the field turned black. Underneath it, the earth rumbled, but no shouts of pain came from Typhlosion. Growling, Reedy rapidly gave another command. Destroy it all with Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam was useless for damaging Typhlosion, but it was powerful enough to slice right through the smoke. Additionally, Hyper Beam should have made Ursaluna require time to rest, but far too much adrenaline was coursing through him. He made full use of his guts to bypass that recharge time, but he would suffer from a massive crash later in return. Ursaluna's pure white beam divided the smoke in two, and even with the immunity of the ghost type, that Hyper Beam was strong enough that the force alone would have hurt Typhlosion. But just like the earthquake, the move never hit. Typhlosion wasn't on the ground. It was crazy what a single, hidden jump could do. Look up. Above you. Reedy yelled. Barely standing from the ongoing effects, Ursaluna brought his head back. Typhlosion was falling as a shadow in front of the sun. She hurtled downwards even as Reedy's Pokémon prepared itself for a special move, but Typhlosion had no intention to attack from range. Flames wrapped around her body. She tucked in her head and spun. Her entire body became an instrument of fiery punishment, and Sam whispered this attack's name. Flame Wheel. As she hurtled toward the earth, Ursaluna tried to rear back to get ready to knock her away, but Typhlosion's control over her flames was far too extreme. Wisps wrapped the flaming wheel her body had become, and mid-air, they jerked her to the side. The defensive swipe only clawed at the air. Typhlosion curved down and slammed right into Ursaluna's chest. Through all the pain, he roared a horrible roar, and Reedy let out a single laugh. All of this and all of this, and you're repeating what you did in the beginners tournament, Reedy mumbled. Except, this time around, I can't order Ursaluna to push through and punch you in the face when he's already so close to a feint. Bouncing off her target, Typhlosion landed on the ground. All of her fire, all of her wisps, the burn and the curse ate right into Ursaluna's body. But still, he did not fall. He had as much willpower as Annihilape more, given the amount of punishment he was taking. His entire body was poised for a lunge as his eyes met Typhlosion's. He glared at her, but that's all he did. The only thing he could muster was a sharp grin, and then he no longer had any energy left to keep standing up. He fell. Ursaluna is no longer able to battle. Trainer Reedy is out of usable Pokémon, the referee yelled. With this, the battle is over. A pause. Trainer Samuel is the winner. Immediately, the world became consumed by roars. The audience's cheers were deafening, and Sam was used to deafening roars. Ursaluna laid motionless on the ground while Typhlosion towered over him. She nodded at her opponent before drawing back her head. Her cry seemed to shake the very sky itself. The referee's announcement had been meaningless to Sam, but this shout from Typhlosion had said it all. Because, after so long, this battle had concluded. Only Typhlosion remained. Against Reedy, against his friend, against his traveling partner, against someone who he would consider a rival, Sam had finally, actually, utterly, completely. Sam had won. Chapter 173. Make way, make way. Future conference champion coming through. Reedy practically burst straight into the restaurant before Sam, and Sam awkwardly followed her in. Just about every person here quieted down to send a look at the newly arriving pair of trainers. And then everyone saw just who they were. And the entire place erupted into cheers. Sam and Reedy got to eat free, with food and drinks being slid their way from both the restaurant itself and other people paying respects. In return, they shared stories, offered tips, and talked about their teams. The boisterous atmosphere lured other people into the building, and that was the perfect bait for the restaurant. Though Sam and Reedy got to pig out without paying for anything, everyone who walked in still had to pay for their own meals. At a certain point, Reedy jumped on a table to regale the place with all of their adventures. She spoke of their first battle on the boat, their battle in the beginners tournament, the time they had fished up a mook in Ecruteak, Miss Drevis's spooky approach in Ilex, the Lapras herd in Union Cave, the wild Dragonite attack outside of Blackthorn, their fight through the Pokémon horde north of Mahogany Town, and then so much more. She had a story to tell for every question, and Sam laughed along. The bright atmosphere was infectious, and some people even approached him with questions of their own. He made sure to give answers, advice, and anecdotes in reply. Out of all of the people to approach him with questions, the vast majority had a ghastly or haunter on their teams. He'd give them his answer, and then someone else would speak up to ask him for advice. Though he was being crowded, he found he didn't mind this. It was nice to help out. With the tournament having lasted for what had felt like ages, Sam was already tired heading into the party. As time passed, he started to feel outright exhausted and needed to escape. Reedy still looked pumped and full of energy, but she caught his glance and understood. Somehow, she managed to get them a chance to slip out of the restaurant, and then they found themselves a nice, quiet bench that let them look out across the entire town. Ugh, yet. All of my Pokémon are exhausted, Sam said to Reedy as they took in the sea of lights that was Silver Town. I might have to use a haunter in my next match. My team went from a bunch of tough battles straight into a fight against Xavier, and then they had to use basically all they had left in our battle against you. Reedy laughed at the unintentional compliment. I think Ursaluna passed out in the Pokémon Center and still hasn't woken up, she said. Porygon's in my Pokéjur, and Wordier likes to go to bed early. I've already sent Kangaskhan back home, and she's making sure baby is getting all of the candy he needs. Sam laughed as well, but then he let out a sigh as he thought about the current state of his team. Yeah, he said. Typhlosion fights as both my starter and finisher, but think about everything she's gone through recently. She kept standing even after Honchro's attack when facing Xavier, she finished it off with the strongest blast burn I'd ever seen her use, and then against you, she did the same thing again to knock out Ursaluna with a flame wheel. Hey, Reedy replied. So if your team's so exhausted, are you worried about your next battle? Sam waved a hand. Maybe, but not really. Most of us are pretty tired, but we have tonight to rest and should still have a few good fights left in us. We still have a few tricks left, too. Like, Jengar hasn't even used haste to punish anyone trying to set up against us, and did you know Dragapult knows Sucker Punch? Wow. She never used that against Dragonite, Reedy mused. That's because she didn't need to, Sam explained. That whole battle with Dragonite was all about straightforward clashes. And then, at the end, Sucker Punch should have been used, but she was too far away to slip past Draco Meteor. But her use of Dragon Darts was pretty much inspired by that. After their battle, Sam and Reedy had received a pretty stern talking to. As much as it was a victory that Dragapult and Dragonite had evolved, immediately throwing themselves into such a serious fight could have been a risk. Evolutions needed time to stabilize, although, as dragon types, this match was likely to their benefit. Evolving and immediately trying to prove their superiority against another dragon probably helped them out, but fainting so soon right after likely wasn't great. Dragonite is still in the Pokémon Center, Reedy said to Sam, but she's not injured. The Chansey there are helping her get used to having hands. Dragapult is asleep, but I'm not sure about her chances in battle from here, Sam said with a sigh. She's stronger than ever, but she only has one Dreepit with her. Like, a Dragapult uses its Dreepit to fight, but they also help stabilize a Dragapult's flight. Unless she wants to slow down, she's going to have a pretty nasty drift to one side. Our future opponents will be able to take advantage of that. And I doubt she'll get another Dreepy anytime soon unless I find some way to talk to a dragon tamer in Galar. The only Pokémon on Sam's team that he could say were truly ready for their next battle were Anilope and Mismagius. Anilope could take and recover from a punishment quickly, but Mismagius didn't actually have that much stamina she'd need to recover. Technically, she tired out quickly, but she recovered just as fast and could shift a lot of that exhaustion off onto others by clever applications of Pain Split. But that's enough about the conference, Sam said, turning to the side and throwing an arm over the bench. I know it's the big thing on everyone's mind, but I have to know. He spoke in a reporter's voice for this. So, Miss Meredith, now that you're free of all these battles, what are your plans next? Well, Reedy said alongside a giggle, I'm going to go to Pokémon Land. Both of them cackled at that joke. But, for real cease, I've been thinking about this. Sam, I know the rest of the conference still needs to happen, but I think I might pay a psychic-type trainer to teleport me home. Sam shot up in his seat. You're leaving? So soon? You lost, and now, you're going home. Reedy's eyes widened as she heard his shocked tone, and she quickly waved her arms in a panic to try to get him to calm down. No, no. It's not like that. I'm not abandoning you because you beat me. It's just. Her gaze fell, and she returned to staring out over the city. Sam knew this was serious, and he fell back into his normal position as he stared out alongside her. I left home without saying goodbye to anyone, Reedy said quietly. I took Teddy Ursa, and then I just dashed. I used all of my savings to buy myself a ticket on a boat, and from what I heard from my parents, Mama Bear was furious. She let out a conflicted laugh. My parents were terrified until my aunt contacted them and told them I was with her, and then I spent months without calling home because I was scared about what they were going to say. But I kept advertising their business, and my Pokémon kept getting stronger. And then, when I finally called them to talk about Mr. Pokémon, they were just happy that I had contacted them at all. I don't want to stay so far away from them any longer, Reedy said. I want to go home. I want to see my parents. I want to see my family. I want to see Mama Bear. Our Machoke. Our Machop. And everyone else. I've been gone for months at this point, and I want to see everyone again. Plus, she said, continuing as a bit of laughter returned to her voice. Imagine their reaction to Dragonite. I've talked to her, and both of us want to see the looks on everyone's faces when they witness a pseudo-legendary help them carry everything around. Sam laughed alongside her at that idea, but his laughter faded away into a long sigh. It hurt to know that Reedy would be leaving so soon, but at the same time, he understood. I get it, he said, tired. I was able to call my mom all the time, and that helped me not get too homesick. But, I think if she hadn't come to the conference, I would have wanted to go back to her. As much as I love traveling the world and seeing all these new places and training with so many ghost types, I also miss my home. I wouldn't have had the energy to stay. Reedy wiped her eyes as she nodded, but she wore a soft smile on her face. Despite her defeat, she hadn't mourned her loss in the slightest. She might have been eliminated from the tournament, but everything she'd accomplished meant her journey overall had been a victory. She had earned all 8 gym badges. She had earned herself a sponsorship. She had gathered a genuinely incredible collection of rare and powerful Pokémon, and she had made it into the top 16 of a conference that involved hundreds. Her achievements firmly placed her within the top few % of every trainer in Johto. Honestly, she probably would have even had the chance to go further if she hadn't faced Sam in the previous round. All that time apart just to meet up for a week and a half, and now, I'm heading home, she mumbled. Sam stared at her sullen expression until an idea came to mind, and he stood up from his seat. The shadows under his feet supported his decision, vibrating merrily in return. Why look so sad? He asked. Reedy snapped her head up. She saw his smile and looked at him in shock, and that shock grew when he held out his hand. Sure, you're heading back, but is this really the end? He asked. I'm still in the conference. You still have your Pokémon. And we've only been through one region. Sure, you're going home, but is that going to be it? Are you really telling me that you're planning on ending your journey here? Reedy stared at him, wide-eyed, her gaze flicking between the bright smile on his face and his offered hand. And then, she laughed. Joyously. This wasn't over just yet. She clasped his arm, and Sam dragged her to her feet. Yeah, she cheered. No point in getting sad, we've only been to one region out of so many. And the conference is still going on. We have to support you. As soon as I get home, I'll spend some money. Sam gasped in mock surprise, and Reedy rolled her eyes. I'll spend some money, she continued, and I'll buy a bunch of snacks while gathering my entire family. I'll even grab the projector we use for movie nights just so we can watch your battle. Because of me, you'll have the support of my entire family behind you. We'll cheer so loudly that you'll be able to hear all of us in Vermilion from your battle in Johto. Sam laughed. Thanks, Reedy, he said. No problem, Sam. You'd do the same for me, right? He blinked, mouth falling open without any response behind it. He would try to do the same for her, but he didn't exactly have as many people and Pokémon to gather up as Reedy. Seeing his blank stare, Reedy blinked as well before bursting into laughter. Ah, come on, Sam. You'd really let me down like that? She asked, elbowing his arm while batting her eyes. No, no. I'd walk all over town talking about you, he replied quickly. I'd have my ghost types enter every home in Dewford. I'd get my mom to share the news with all of her contacts. Before too long, I'd have the entire island shouting your name. Now, with your ghost types, they'd be shouting your name out of fear, Reedy quipped. Anyway, once I have everything set up, I'll take pictures of everyone and send them to. She froze. Hold on, you have an email, right? Reedy asked. Sam ended up going stock still as well. Did we really never exchange emails? He whispered in disbelief. I mean, we sent each other messages during the last month of the season, but we usually just passed notes through the Pokémon centers or talked through calls, Reedy said with a sniff. We were busy training, and Porygon would get hungry. Neither of us had any access to usable computers. Shoot. Okay. Yeah. Hurriedly, Sam checked his pockets to see if he had any loose paper on him, but Reedy just pulled out her Pokejar with a typable screen open and placed it in his hands. Okay, thanks. I'll give you the same email I use for online forums. I think I have to make a new one, Reedy muttered. Now that I'm thinking about this, I probably can't just use my family's business email to send messages to you. The idea of that made Sam laugh. They quickly swapped contact information, and they made jokes about how they had never bothered to do this until now. Once the next season started, Sam promised they'd meet up in Vermilion, and then they would decide on where to continue their journey together next. But for now, they started to head back to the restaurant. As stuffed as they were, they wanted to see just how much food they could bring back to their teams. Oh, yeah. By the way, who's your next opponent tomorrow? Reedy asked as they walked back to the people who were so willing to give them free food. Oh. Victor, I think, Sam said. That other first season trainer. Yeah, "But I'm not too worried," he replied. "I've already beaten him twice, now. Sure, it might have been a while since our last fight, but how hard could he possibly be?" Chapter 174. Sam was on his final Pokémon, but Victor still had two. This entire battle had been a slog of back-to-back knockouts, with one Pokémon tiring itself to knock out another just to be knocked out in return by whatever healthy opponent was sent out next. Victor had come out of the gate swinging, catching Sam off guard by proving that ghost types could still be trapped. As a fire type, his Houndoom was immune to burns, and its flash fire ability meant all fire-type moves would only ever be absorbed. It locked Typhlosion in place due to a dark-type crunch that held her down. She then fainted to a pursuit when Sam decided to risk bringing her back to her Pokeball, and then it was all quick exchanges from there. Gengar knocked out the Houndoom by confusing it into taking a Shadow Ball. In return, an Umbreon chased him down and took him out with an overwhelming Dark Pulse. That Umbreon then fell to Trevenant's immense sustain, but Trevenant fell to a Toxic from a Vileplume, and that Vileplume fell to a persistent Assault from Annihilape. Unfortunately, Annihilape came out of that fight suffering from a Toxic just like Trevenant before him, and that removed the energy he needed to fight back against a Weevil. Finally, Dragapult practically shattered that Weevil with a powerful blow from Dreepy, but the Weevil's ice slowed her just enough for a Crobat to secure a feint. Now, Sam only had Mismagius left, and she was facing that Crobat, which unfortunately outmatched her speed. The problem with her opponent was the Crobat's flight and maneuverability. It flew circles around her literally and it battered her with its whines. For all of the energy she had over it, she needed to break this ongoing pattern. She needed to take out this Crobat and whatever was sent out next. Otherwise, Sam was going to lose. "Mean look, Nightshade," he shouted, the exhaustion building. "Defend, and keep boosting yourself with nasty plot." The constant back and forth wasn't even the worst part of this match. That was Victor himself. It wasn't that the Dark-type trainer was sending Sam any taunts, it was that he was remaining completely and utterly silent and never responded to anything Sam said. "Aerial Ace," Victor ordered, speaking with a neutral, straightforward confidence. His Crobat had been flying above Mismagius, but upon hearing its orders, all four of its wings snapped downward to rocket it into the sky. Upon reaching the peak of that launch, it allowed itself to fall, and then it accelerated to impossible speeds with the intention of bringing all of that straight into Mismagius. Sam held his breath. Aerial Ace's speed meant it was impossible to dodge. But, all of this build-up was giving Mismagius more and more time to enhance herself with nasty plot. If she could get a quick knockout here, then she could get a quick knockout against her next foe. That was their path forward, and that was their path to victory. But, right before the Crobat hit the floor, it pulled upwards, and all of its downwards momentum shifted into a horizontal launch that pierced straight into Mismagius's Nightshade. She let out a horrible cry, but her darkness did not fall. Just like Typhlosion and Annihilape before her, Mismagius refused to fall here. "Yes!" Sam roared. "Now, grab it and use Psychic." Victor called for another Aerial Ace. He clearly did not want to deal with any nonsense of Mismagius dodging. This time around, the Crobat tried to open a path by sending out blades of wind first. With every flap of its wings, a blade from Air Cutter rushed her, but Mismagius tore all of them apart with a thunderous Psybeam. Crobat tried to slip in under that attack. Given that she was responding to a previous move, Psybeam should have opened her up to Crobat's attack, but Mismagius was prepared. Her Nightshade exploded outwards, briefly blinding Crobat, and right before it reached her, the flying type abruptly stopped. Her Psychic locked it in place, inches away, freezing it in front of her mid-air. "There," Sam breathed. "That's it." The Crobat screeched out of both frustration and pain. Its poison type made it vulnerable to this Psychic type move, and Mismagius's nasty plot let her lean into that. Dark type energy did swirl around Crobat's teeth in an attempt to break out and use Crunch for a final lunge, but Mismagius never let that happen. She squeezed with Psychic, and that was it. The Crobat crumpled to the ground. "Now Victor only has one Pokémon left, but Mismagius has nasty plot up," Sam said as the referee announced Crobat's feint. "To win, we'll only need to land one solid attack." However, as Sam watched his opponent, he saw the worst reaction possible. For all Victor had been trying to stay serious during this fight, a smile had crept onto his face. "Murkrow," he named. Sam had taken notes on every Pokémon Victor had, and while he had been hoping for a different dark type of his, he knew what this Murkrow could do. With its appearance, both trainers knew this battle was about to end. Mystical fire, Sam ordered quickly. In response, Victor's Murkrow conjured a tailwind that doubled its speed. Flames washed out. Murkrow avoided them all. Its eyes flashed for a detect, and it banked to avoid a wave of fire that rushed it from below. "Keep it up!" Sam called out. "And keep an eye on the shadows, too." Miss Magius almost immediately caught on to his meaning, and she sent him a look over her shoulder. When they made eye contact, he sent her a nod. And to that, her cackle pierced through the air. The exchange continued. Miss Magius maintained her mystical fire, but Victor seemed content to wait. His Murkrow focused on defense and defense alone, and its small size and incredible speed let it avoid all parts of Miss Magius's attack. But at a certain point, Victor saw it, a small opening that'd safely bring his Murkrow straight to Sam's Pokémon. "Sucker Punch!" he shouted. For the briefest of moments, his smile widened. Miss Magius didn't stop her mystical fire, and she looked tired. From his perspective, he had just one Murkrow dove straight into that opening through the flood of fire to reach Miss Magius, managing to slip in right under her defense. In the momentary build-up of her next attack, it was in the perfect position to jab with its beak before she could set up a guard. But what neither it nor Victor noticed was Sam's trick, both the Murkrow's and Miss Magius's shadows had connected. This was the end. Sam let out a sigh. He had predicted this outcome. But at least with this strategy, Miss Magius would not fall on her own. "Murkrow knows taunt," Sam spoke as Miss Magius's cackles echoed, and she brought up her arms. "If we focused on using status moves, you would have called for that, and then Miss Magius would have been forced to use attacks that'd just give Murkrow the freedom for a sucker punch. Alternatively, if we only used attacks, we could avoid that taunt, but then we'd just be skipping straight to the end," Sam continued. "Murkrow could just slip in and use sucker punch anyway. But without a taunt up, you would have one last chance for a status move," Victor said solemnly for him. Miss Magius's flames made it look as though she was on fire, and she leaned into that darkened jab to her chest. As the sucker punch attack pierced right through her defense, she threw herself into it, and she embraced the Murkrow before she fell. With destiny bound up, the Murkrow fainted alongside her. Truthfully, Sam didn't have any other answers to this. No matter what, Murkrow's sucker punch meant it would always faint Miss Magius here. Sucker punch would always let it move before any of her attacks, and as Sam had trained Miss Magius as a special attacker, she didn't have any useful status moves to shut down whatever the Murkrow used. Destiny Bond had been their only answer. It was the only way to ensure this Murkrow fell. But the rules of the league had already established the outcome for this kind of match. Though both trainers had lost their final Pokémon, this was not a tie. "Both Miss Magius and Murkrow are unable to battle," the referee called out. "But we do have a winner. As trainer Samuel has secured this knockout by fainting his own Pokémon, his Pokémon is considered to have fainted first. Thus, according to the rules of the Pokémon League, trainer Samuel is out of usable Pokémon first. So, I can announce this, trainer Victor is the winner." To that, cheers exploded out from the crowd. This was an upset. No one expected Victor to win. The audience clapped, but Sam did as well. As much as it stung, it was a good battle. He had at least fainted every member of his opponent's team. But as he shook Victor's hand, the truth settled in: Sam's season in Johto had ended. With this defeat, his time in the conference was over. It wasn't just Sam's presence in the conference that was over. The conference itself was over. Somehow, Victor didn't just win against Sam. He and his team of dark types pulled off a victory in the semifinals, and then, in an incredible turn, he managed to win against an aspiring ace trainer and their very scary Electivire. When Sam watched that final battle, he was silent the whole time. Seeing the threat that Victor's final opponent posed, he had no idea how his team could have won in Victor's place. In the end, only a third of the competing trainers were still around to stand in rows during the concluding ceremony, and the audience was thrown into an ecstatic uproar at that dark horse victory. The conference concluded with Victor at the top platform, clutching a trophy while tears poured out of his eyes. When given a microphone, he was practically inconsolable. So filled with joy, he could barely speak, but he managed to say the one thing that practically tore all attention off of him. "This is all thanks to Miss Karen," he shouted through his tears. And then, everyone wanted to know who this Karen was. Everyone wanted to know about the mysterious person who had tutored a newbie trainer so well that the newbie had won the conference overall. Victor had his share of focus, but all conversations shifted in an instant. Although Sam, Reedy, and so many others had had their time in the limelight, with this unexpected finish, no one was talking about them, their Pokémon, or any of their team's reveals any longer. Days passed. Sam said his goodbyes. Reedy gave him an open invitation to visit her home in Kanto, and Xavier disappeared to spend the break between seasons over in Sinnoh. Silver Town became empty of its guests and visitors, but Sam chose to remain. This place, he asked as he approached one building at the end of a street, and Typhlosion stared at the ramshackle structure before slowly nodding her head. Sam checked the paths around them, but no one was nearby. Though Silver Town was a populated city, it was quiet. With the conference being over, its hustle and bustle had all but faded away. Head in, Sam said to his Pokémon. I'll stay out here to keep watch. I believe in you. I'll make sure you aren't bothered, and I'll take this time to rest. Sending him a soft smile, Typhlosion pressed her head against his chest. Chuckling, Sam hugged her back. Then, she tore away the boards that sealed the building's front door and stepped into the darkness. So far, this was the third place Typhlosion had found. Now that the city was no longer so overpopulated with life, it was easier to sense wayward spirits. As much as Sam had the potential to return home, he didn't, and he stayed here with Typhlosion to let her search for and help any long-forgotten ghosts. And doing so gave him the chance to think. Top 8, Sam mumbled to himself. Honestly, he wasn't really keeping watch. He hadn't seen any patrolling ace trainers since the end of the conference, and even if someone called him out, he could point to the little ghost mark on his trainer ID as proof of his team's role. So he just became lost in thought, instead. He thought about everything that had happened and what his team had managed to achieve. Anything past the first round was impressive for a first-year trainer, and getting to the top 8 would be impressive for anyone. This was a victory for Sam. But losing still hurt. Watching every battle after his, Sam had seen no way forward. Any other opponent would have been just as tough as Victor, and his team had already started to flag. Even if Sam had made it to the next round, his team would have been too tired to continue, and then they would have just been stuck in 2 back-to-back matches. He would have lost once, and then he would have been forced into another battle the next day, fighting on the conference's final day to see who would place third. He could at least take a slight bit of comfort in that. Losing had helped his reputation. He had lost to the one person who had won overall, inspiring questions about where he would have placed if he had continued, and he had managed to knock out Victor's entire team. For that, he had his reward. Not wanting to dwell on negative thoughts, Sam reached into his backpack to pull out a certain packet for what felt like the 1000th time in the past few days. It was heavy in his hands, and there were enough pages within it to be bound into an entire book. Now, what do I do now? He whispered. It felt as though every organization in Indigo had sent him an offer, and he had even received offers from people outside of both Johto and Kanto. He had requests to meet him, offers for sponsorships, proposed deals for advertisements in all forms, and he even had a decent number of researchers reaching out to him with requests to meet his newly discovered Pokémon. Even Mr. Pokémon had sent him a letter. The man had offered him a very generous proposal, likely inspired by his current deal with Reedy. Not just him, Agatha had once again presented Sam with an apprenticeship offer, and even Morty was trying to recruit him as a member of his gym. The league itself wanted to hire Sam as an ace trainer, and though they paid less than other offers, their deal presented the most overall benefits. Still, that wasn't an easy choice. Sam had received 4 different offers from the league. He could choose to be an ace trainer in Hoenn, Kanto, Johto, or even Sinnoh. Even more than that, he was surprised to see that Professor Carolina from the Sinjar Ruins had reached out to him. She wanted to temporarily bring him on as a research assistant over in Sinnoh. Similarly, Spencer Hale had reached out with an offer, but given that man's obsession with Unown, Sam had a feeling that his offer was more of just a way to pay respects. And then, there was also one other offer contained in this packet. But it was just a letter. There was no deal. No money. No benefits. Just a personal message containing an invitation, an address, and a chance to talk. So flush with options, Sam didn't know what to do. This was everything he wanted, and even more past that. Honestly, it was overwhelming. As much as he had wanted to win overall, his true goal was to secure his team the support they deserved, and that was something he could pick himself from the flood of options before him. But he just didn't know what to choose. Sam, a soft voice suddenly said. Hearing his name, Sam snapped his head up from the papers and tried to scramble to close the packet. However, he froze when he saw just who was standing there, and he could barely stop his jaw from dropping open. "Mom," he said. "But we said goodbye. I thought you already went home." To that, she smiled kindly, and she let out a soft laugh. "And leave you here? Alone? Abandon you while you're stuck like this? I had to head to the airport to cancel my flight, but I came back here to find you," she said. "Don't take me for a fool, sweetie. I was never going to force you to do this on your own. I'm not on my own. I'm with my team." "Yes, but I suppose you wouldn't mind some help from someone familiar with this kind of work, He felt the heat rush to his face, and his mother tittered before joining him on the stairs. Though the house was silent behind him, he could feel a soft, comfortable cold that told him that Tiflosion was succeeding with what she set out to do. "So," his mother started. "What offers have you been considering?" "All of them," Sam answered with a grumble. "I don't know which to pick." "Do you have any preferences for what you want?" she asked. "Money. Ranching options for the Mankey. Maybe some new ways to meet ghost types. Then take out all of the offers that don't give those to you." Sam tried to think of what he'd take out, but he still felt frozen. Honestly, he couldn't think of even a single offer that he'd want to eliminate. "I see," his mother said, nodding. "Choice paralysis. You don't want to give up what might turn out to be the best deal, even if it seems worse than the others at first glance." "Yeah," Sam sighed, "and it also feels. Ugh. I don't know. Am I even in a place to turn any of these down? And do I even want to accept any of these offers? I'd be tying myself to them, but I'd be getting everything I wanted. It feels weird to make a choice, and it also feels weird to accept any of them since I lost." He stared at the stack of papers, and his grip crinkled its sides. His mother watched him, and after a few short seconds, she let out a brief laugh. When Sam brought his head up at the noise, he found that she was smiling. "Ah," she said. "You're in a funk." She spoke as if happy to have recognized that. "Am not," Sam countered. "Are too," she replied. He glared at her, but his glare only lasted until she poked him on the nose, leaving him reeling back and stuttering. "Okay, Sam. I want you to remember that no matter what you choose, you won't be alone. Nothing is going to change between you and your friends, and nothing is going to change between you and anyone you turn down. What matters right now is selecting the option that'll make you the most well-off and happy. And, your loss isn't important. The only thing people are focusing on is your incredible success." "So," he grumbled. "So, be proud of yourself," his mother cheered. "You deserve this. Accept your achievements, and look through the packet with that approach. Think positively while choosing what you want, and narrow down which option best fits with your team." "But I still need to get your mind off of it," his mother mumbled, tapping her chin in thought. Then, I wanted to wait until we got home, but I do think that I have an offer of my own." As he watched her suspiciously, Sam saw a glint enter her eyes. It felt as though his mother didn't have an offer in the classic sense, but she still seemed excited for what she had to say. There was an energy to her, and that energy saw her practically hop off the stairs. Shifting her stance, she stopped looking like a bookstore owner. With a pair of pokeballs at her waist, Sam realized that she now looked like a proper Pokémon trainer. "I know it hurts to lose," his mother said. "I know it hurts to have something you so desperately desire only for it to be taken away. I know that it hurts to have something so suddenly snatched from you. But I also know that not everything deserves that kind of attention, and this is not one of those situations," she said to him. "You've achieved something incredible, so let's break you out of this funk." "What are you planning?" he asked, eyes narrowing. His mother just smiled. "Samuel Greyson," she shouted, her voice booming, the sound echoing. "Right now, don't think of me as your mother. Think of me as an opponent. I have Delcatty. I have Sabai. I have experience. So, I have all of the requirements needed to present you with this." She paused for dramatic effect. "I, Amanda Greyson, challenge you to a Pokémon battle." And, before Sam realized what he was doing, the words had already left his mouth. "All right," he said. "I accept." Chapter 175. Sam wasn't entirely sure how he got here, but if his mother was going to present him with a challenge, then he was not going to let her down. He had faced Reedy, Eliza, Xavier, and even Victor. He had placed at an incredible top 8 in the conference. His achievements were immense, and his team's power was great. But he knew nothing about how his mother fought or even just how strong Delcatty and Sabai actually were. "Alright, sweetie. For this match, we'll have a double battle. So, I want you to send out 2 Pokémon to face me, alright?" "Alright," Sam repeated slowly. He watched his mother press an arm out to her side to stretch, and in the distance, a lone jogger ran alongside a sweatband-wearing Gran Bull. A grid of practice fields stretched out around them, but without the conference going on, no one else was out here to train. "Right. Here goes," his mother shouted. "Come out, Delcatty. Get ready, Sabai." Appearing on the field were the 2 Pokémon Sam expected to see, Delcatty, nobly holding up her head as if to show off her pristine coat, and Sabai, scratching at the ground as if not interested in anything going on, but he still shot Sam a look, and there was a certain glint to his eyes that spoke of wanting a good fight. Sam could see his mother smiling, and she maintained that expression while placing her hands on her hips, waiting for him to send out the 2 Pokémon he'd use. "Don't hold back. Treat us like any other opponent. You'll be surprised by just what we can do, so choose your Pokémon carefully," she called out to him. Sam knew that his mother had earned a handful of gym badges on her journey years ago, and he also knew that Delcatty had once worked alongside his father as a Pokémon Ranger. Delcatty had absolutely dominated Typhlosion back when she was a Cyndaquil getting ready for her journey, but that was basically a year ago at this point. There was no telling what Delcatty could do right now. Weighing his options carefully, Sam knew he wanted to see just how much both sides of this battle had improved. And, since this was his mother he'd be facing, he knew he wouldn't have this battle proceed in any other way. "Typhlosion!" Sam yelled, as he knew his starter Pokémon deserved to be here. "You too, Miss Magius." These two worked well together, but as his mother watched them, she gained a curious smile. "Choosing your first 2 Pokémon, I caught an Ilope and Gengar way before Miss Magius," Sam said. "She's not one of my first." "No, but you told me the story yourself," his mother replied. "You caught Miss Magius far before even Typhlosion, didn't you?" Sam sent a glance to the floating Pokémon, and Miss Magius seemed to be having a staring contest with Delcatty. A mischievous grin had crept onto the ghost type's face, and Delcatty was almost acting as if that look was a challenge to her authority that she could not let go unpunished. "Yeah," Sam said quietly, watching the Pokémon he had gone through the Ilex forest with so many years before. "I did, didn't I?" "Now then," his mother said, completing her stretches and righting her stance. "Since I was the one to present you with this challenge, I'll let you choose what move to use first." Her expression was kind, but this offer was anything but. Both of them knew that Sam would hesitate to initiate any too powerful moves against Pokémon that he wasn't sure of their strength. "Sure," he said, thinking quickly. Right now, this battle was the only thing that mattered. "Typhlosion, start with a basic flamethrower. Miss Magius, I want you to stay in the back and focus on boosting yourself with nasty plot." Right away, Miss Magius darted backward to make room between her and her opponents, and Typhlosion positioned herself close to the field's center to purposefully serve as a barrier for anyone who tried to reach her partner. As Miss Magius's eyes narrowed, her mind became filled with differing methods of inflicting pain, and Typhlosion breathed in to build heat. A powerful exhale saw a gout of flame shoot outward to threaten to burn anything in its path. However, even with all of the power her attack possessed, this flamethrower was a deliberate move with an obvious path. Delcatty and Sabai jumped out of the way with ease, splitting off to leap to opposite sides of the field. So far apart, Typhlosion would not be able to track both of them at once. "Here we go, Delcatty!" Sam's mother yelled. "Start with foresight on both of them. And Sabai, you know what you need to do to shut them down." Sabai was no longer staring at the dirt. His gemstone eyes locked onto Miss Magius in the back, and his grin exposed his sharpened teeth. Typhlosion snapped her head to him, recognizing him as the more immediate threat to her partner, and she breathed in to prepare another flamethrower while Miss Magius continued to build in the back. However, Sabai looked utterly unconcerned, and all he had to do was snap his clawed fingers to cause her move to sputter out in her throat. Then, Miss Magius suddenly let out a frustrated wail. She practically threw her arms out to her sides. In an instant, her nasty plot failed. Sam had trouble believing his eyes. How did he do that? That was 2 moves at once. Was it? His mother replied almost tauntingly. Or was it just disable and torment, used back to back? No, that's not true. He only snapped his fingers once. Hey, his mother said, putting on a curious tone while obviously lying. How strange. Now that you point it out, I think you're right. Disable removed the possibility of any further flamethrowers, and torment prevented Miss Magius from using any back-to-back moves. For now, Sam didn't want to rush into this too quickly, so he had Miss Magius continue to hang out in the back while he focused on Typhlosion using her attacks. Incinerate. Ward away both of them. Thunderbolt, his mother shouted to Delcatty. Into Thunder Wave. Then, run to the back. Letting out a loud meow, Delcatty jumped at Typhlosion, and Typhlosion spat out a glob of fire. Sabai took a step to the side to avoid the bursting flames, but Delcatty chose to strike straight through this move. Her fur radiated with energy, but it was not anything electric. A lightning bolt shot off of Delcatty, but she was using energy only in its rawest form. Somehow, her Thunderbolt was a normal type attack, not an electric type attack, and her foresight let it hit Typhlosion. The shared type alongside the conversion gave this move extra power, and even though Typhlosion was able to withstand it, she was still pushed back. That moment was all Sabai needed to run past her side, but Typhlosion was not in a position to stop him without using her full speed. Still holding back, all of her attention was sent toward Delcatty instead. That feline Pokémon started to charge her, letting Sabai slip into a shadow to slide across the field in a transparent shadow sneak. Hacks, Miss Magius, Sam ordered. Typhlosion, incinerate again. Wisps formed around Miss Magius as a defense, and Typhlosion spat out another glob of flames. Rather than continue his approach toward Miss Magius, Sabai's eyes flashed for a detect that let him weave through the incoming move. Meanwhile, Delcatty jumped to the side with a quick attack to avoid the incinerate, and then raw energy radiated off of her again. This time, her move was not meant to deal damage but pulse through Typhlosion. Typhlosion did her best to block, but she wasn't running off just yet, and the Thunder Wave was able to paralyze her immobile form. Quash! Make an opening, Sam's mother ordered next. With his detect just now wearing off, Sabai slipped right under where Miss Magius was floating to suddenly jump up and slap her on her back. With Torment preventing her from using the same move again, she had been preparing a mystical fire, but Quash made her move stall. With Typhlosion paralyzed, Delcatty had the freedom to run and charge at Miss Magius in the back. Then, just like Typhlosion before her, Miss Magius was hit with a normal type Thunderbolt. Sabai's Quash prevented her from going through with any defense in time, and the move's force slid her back. I see. I get it, Sam said. I get why you wanted to have this fight. Tell me, then, his mother replied. Sam's eyes flicked over the current state of the field, and he let out a slight sigh. It's a reminder, he answered. You're purposefully using tricks and strategies no one else has ever used. Delcatty has her normalize ability trained and I'm pretty sure that hasn't been discovered yet. And Quash? That move? Has anyone ever seriously used that? His mother inclined her head while holding back a laugh. You're using things from the new Pokédex to redirect my focus, Sam continued. You're trying to show me that we might have made it to the conference, but there are so many things we still stand to learn about how to fight. As his mother started to radiate pride, she paused. Sam's expression changed. Except, you've made a mistake, he said. How so? His mother cautiously asked. You challenged me to a battle to try to get me back to normal, and now, after seeing all of this, Sam smiled. I really want to win our fight. His Pokémon had been holding back. Typhlosion hadn't moved or used her speed at all to counter Delcatty's charge. Meanwhile, Miss Magius had barely received any commands, which had given his mother plenty of room to act. Now that he'd seen his mother's tricks, Sam was going to stop holding back. He had some tricks of his own that he wanted to demonstrate. Miss Magius, grab Sabai, he shouted. Typhlosion, you already know what to do. Miss Magius lunged, and there was nothing Sabai could do to defend against this. What Miss Magius did wasn't a move using energy that could be shut down. She simply rushed the smaller Pokémon to yank him into the air within her ghostly grip. He immediately squirmed in an attempt to escape, biting and tearing into her to try to get her to let go, but Miss Magius was able to offset all of that just by maintaining a low use of pain split. Delcatty was getting ready to help her partner, but Typhlosion still didn't even need to move. She just needed to use Swift. Hearing the stars coming from behind her, Delcatty shifted gears in an attempt to run but failed to outpace them. They slammed into her and Miss Magius, but since Miss Magius was immune, they simply phased through her, letting her angle her victim to use him as a shield against this attack. Of course, as a fellow ghost type, Sabai was immune as well, but Swift hadn't been used with the intention of dealing damage. With ease, it guided a will-o-wisp to both of Typhlosion's opponents at once. There, Sam said. Now both Pokémon are burned. His mother opened her mouth to reply, but stayed quiet instead. She chose to merely watch this battle in silence for now. Both of you, we're finishing this. Sam yelled. Finish off Sabai with Hex, and we'll focus down Delcatty after. With a burn, Hex would feint Sabai quickly, and even if he used Detect, he would not be able to maintain that protection for long. As for Delcatty, her power was much less than either Typhlosion's or Miss Magius's, and as unfair as it was, Sam was willing to take advantage of that by having his Pokémon ignore her until it was time to finish her off. The purple wisps from Hex spread out in every direction, and they were like floating daggers ready to stab down into Sabai. He stopped struggling in Miss Magius's grip, looking up in what was both awe and fear. As the wisps crashed down toward him, they never actually hit. Sabai was suddenly sucked away, turned to red light, and Delcatty was returned right afterward. All right. Enough of that. You beat us, Sam. We surrender. It took a moment for Sam to process his mother's words before he could awkwardly laugh. Yeah. That makes sense. I might have gotten a bit too intense there. It's fine. That was what I was looking for. His mother crossed the field to walk up to him, stopping only slightly to give an affectionate pet to Typhlosion. Both she and Miss Magius let out sighs as their adrenaline wore down. Sam's mother was smiling when she reached him, and he had so many questions. However, she spoke up before he could ask any of them. Let's get something to eat. All right, Sam said quickly. But I want you to promise that you'll tell me more about Delcatty and Sabai's strategy. I want to know everything you've taught them. His mother laughed. All right. I promise. She bought him ice cream. His mother hadn't bought him ice cream since he was a child. Except, she didn't just buy him ice cream. She bought his entire team ice cream. With the city so empty, the little ice cream shop had a section of unoccupied tables out front. All of Sam's Pokémon had space to come out, and an entire swarm of shadows was able to enjoy a chilly, late afternoon treat. Jengar practically swallowed his in seconds, and then he started to stalk around, excitedly looking for more. All of the Ghastly and Haunter got their own little trays, and Miss Magius kept an eye on all of them, making sure none ever stole any from their neighbors. Not a fan of freezing temperatures, Trevenant passed up the ice cream, but he got a nice paper cup of berry syrup to drop into his mouth and chew. Anilope, meanwhile, sat on a fence and held a dripping cone while glaring at anyone who just happened to pass by. But Typhlosion, Sam, Delcatty, and Sam's mother all sat around the same table like they would at home so many times before. This time around, Typhlosion was large enough to have her own chair. She wasn't that interested in the cold treat of ice cream, but Sam had a few extra dried berries in his pack that she could have. Delcatty shared a bowl with his mother, but the feline Pokémon wasn't truly interested. It was more like she was just taking the occasional lick just because she could. For the past while, I've been tutoring and rebranding, in a way, his mother said to him in between small bites of ice cream from her bowl. After training you at the start of the season, I realized I missed that kind of work. So, I put up a notice in the local Pokémon Center, and while running my shop, I've been taking requests to tutor new trainers alongside Delcatty and Sabai. It's been paying surprisingly well, she continued after taking another bite. We still have our usual business, but this side job has been giving us an unexpected amount of extra cash. Delcatty let out a meow in support. We've even had a few trainers that we tutored continue to stop by and browse our books, his mother said. They make purchases and spread word of mouth. It's like they never fully realized just how much information a book could hold. She paused briefly. And then, there's you, she said. Me? Sam asked, stopping with a spoon halfway to his mouth. Yes, you, his mother answered with a laugh. In your own way, you've been helping our little bookstore. People are curious about how your team got so strong. When word got out that you'd be competing in the Silver Conference, more and more people started to stop by. They wanted to see if I could share any tips, and they wanted to see if there were any tricks to your success contained within our store. That's why I didn't brush off Reedy's idea for expansion, his mother continued, and she held up the bowl to let Delcatty take one more lick. I like the idea of getting 1 or 2 more stores set up in Hone, and I like the idea of going through a bit of rebranding. We keep the place as a bookstore, but one with a heavier focus on Pokémon and training. Make it less of a place to just shop and more of a place that can offer more. Her gaze shifted as she looked out into the distance. Somewhere to read and chat, his mother said softly. Somewhere people can go to exchange information. A place where people can relax and learn more about Pokémon. Maybe with a little section out back that novice trainers can use to practice moves. Sam could picture it almost as a cafe, but instead of drinks, it'd be a business that provided books and tips instead. He couldn't picture that kind of store getting extremely popular, but he could picture it as having very loyal customers. It would not make much money, but profit wouldn't be the point. It'd make enough to sustain itself, and its real purpose would simply be to have a place everyone could enjoy. I like that, Sam said. I like that a lot, actually. His mother smiled at him, put her spoon down, and ran her fingers through Delcatty's fur. I'm glad. But, speaking of those tricks people ask you about, Sam said. Are you finally going to tell me what was going on with Delcatty and Sabai? His mother blinked, and Sabai cackled his name from where the ghost type was hiding under the table. Oh, yes, his mother said, her eyes widening with excitement. So, I might have been cheating a bit by using information from my copy of Dad's book. Sabai has some interesting abilities, and instead of stating them outright, let me ask you, do you know what they are? Stall, Keen Eye, and Prankster, Sam answered. He'd long since memorized the entries of just about every ghost type. Stall makes a Pokémon always move last, Keen Eye helps a Pokémon aim their attacks, and Prankster lets a Pokémon use their status moves extremely quickly. Correct on all fronts, his mother said proudly. But, here's a follow-up question, what happens when a Pokémon has all of those abilities together? Sam frowned. Some Pokémon had obvious synergies with their abilities, with the most obvious in his mind being Zangoose. That Pokémon might not have been a ghost type, but its interaction with poison had stood out to him. Its immunity ability made it immune to being affected by poison, but while poison was in its system, its toxic boost ability would see its physical power massively increase. However, that synergy was based wholly around a single effect. He couldn't think of how a Sabai's abilities would interact, especially with how Prankster and Stall seemed to do almost the exact opposite thing. They shouldn't do anything, Sam answered, though he wasn't confident in his words. Stall slows a Pokémon while Prankster speeds up a Pokémon, so they should cancel. It's kind of like using a water and fire type move at the same time. Neither move gets to happen, they just wash the other out. Do they? His mother asked as she leaned back in her chair. Or, would a water and fire type move together create steam, instead? He stared at his mother, and she sent him a cheeky smile. He tried to open his mouth to argue, but then he truly considered her words and went quiet in thought. So you're saying that ability combination results in a secret, third option, he said. Proud once again, his mother nodded her head. Prankster and Stall are less about affecting a Pokémon's speed and more about affecting when a Pokémon uses its moves. Sabai's Stall means that he's exceptionally skilled at knowing when to move last, and his Prankster ability means that he's exceptionally skilled at knowing when to move first. So, when combined with the accuracy of Keen Eye, what do those combined skill sets get? A Pokémon that always knows exactly when to move. A Pokémon that's exceptionally skilled at proper timing, his mother confirmed. Sabai's speed doesn't matter. He can choose whenever he wants to attack. In the battle, Sabai had used Disable and Torment almost simultaneously, and he had used both moves with nothing more than a single snap. He was able to shut down Mismagius with a clever use of Quash, and, honestly, Sam was pretty sure that one trick was the entire reason his mother had requested a double battle fight. With that kind of power, Sabai could completely shut down anyone he fights, Sam whispered in amazement. He could constantly use moves to prevent other moves, giving him complete freedom to act. Not quite, his mother said with a slight frown. Using everything together requires a lot of focus, so it tires him out pretty fast. But with enough training, he could combine so many moves together and have his opponents unable to do anything to stop him. Encore, Disable, Taunt, Torment, he could become an absolute menace. He doesn't even need the strength to use any direct attacks if he can just force his opponents to struggle until they faint. But his mother shook her head. He'd still need to carefully select each move perfectly, and a Pokémon's struggle can still damage its foe, she countered. A Sabai doesn't have much stamina, even if heavily trained. Eventually, Sabai's opponent would be able to break through. Sure, Sam replied, but He couldn't deny what his mother had said. Sam knew she was right, at least partially. A Sabai could withstand a few hits, but they were Pokémon more skilled with moves rather than a species with a high innate power. They weren't Pokémon great at direct battles, but hearing how his mother had applied this combination made Sam want to know just how far it could be taken. Right now, he really wanted to train with Sabai just to see how far that strategy could be pushed with proper training. And, of course, Delcatty's attacks were just an application of her normalizability, like you already said, his mother added right after. She can empower her attacks and use them without the need for anything but normal-type energy. Combined with foresight, that means moves with potential immunities like Thunderbolt will always hit, even against ground types. So that's why you taught her Thunder Wave, Sam said, looking up. It always hits, Delcatty has decent speed, and paralyzing her foes helps with that. Delcatty meowed as if to brag. You understand, but of course you do. This strategy was actually inspired by you, his mother said. Sam felt a warmth grow in his chest as he heard his mother's words. Knowing that his team had inspired one of his mother's strategies was, actually really nice. It felt like proof that he was already a trainer others could look up to. But there was still so much he stood to learn, and what he had heard about Sabai was only just the start of it. As much as he had the information from the new Pokédex, he hadn't yet had the chance to experience the true implications of everything in there, and there were so many more ghost types he was yet to encounter or even see in battle. Ugh! Sam let his spoon drop and held his head in his hands. You're talking about all of these plans and strategies, and you're trying to get me excited, but I'm just not, as focused as you. Hearing about how you're so put together doesn't feel like anything I can do. I'm just, here. At the end of the season. At the end of my journey. I've had such a straightforward goal to reach the conference that now that we've made it, it feels like. Like you don't know what to do next, his mother asked. Unfortunately, Sam's silence seemed to all but confirm it for her. You feel as though this chapter of your life is at its end, his mother asked next. Sam wasn't sure what else to say at that, but he ended up whispering the truth about what he was feeling. I think that's why I haven't picked a sponsor. If I choose one, aren't I just admitting that all of this is over? His mother hummed, watching him, and she gave him time to digest the full weight of what he had just said. However, after only half a minute, Sam suddenly heard a loud squeak, and he looked up far too late to see Dreepa hurtling straight at him from above. In an instant, the little dragon type hit the table and slammed into Sam's bowl of half-eaten ice cream. It went flying with a spoon spinning high through the air. Tiflosian tried to stand up to catch it, but the spoon was snatched away by a rushing Ghastly, and then the bowl slammed onto the ground, its chilly interior spreading out into what would soon melt into a sticky puddle. But Jengar appeared and licked all of that away with a single swipe of his tongue. Are you okay? Sam asked, turning back toward the table. He was less concerned about the ice cream and more concerned about how Dreepa was rubbing his head. However, hearing that unexpected question, Dreepa suddenly looked up in shock before truly realizing just where he was. He let out a hurried squeak as if to try to assure Sam that he was okay, but then a shadow fell over the two of them. Everyone here looked up and up at the towering form of the pseudo-legendary Dragapult floating right above them. But rather than fall into any intimidation or annoyance, that fully evolved Pokémon just dropped her head to let out a surprisingly soft chirp. She was extremely apologetic. While practicing, she had gotten distracted and accidentally sent Dreepa this way. It's all right. As long as Dreepa is okay, Sam said. Quickly, Dreepa dashed back up to his spot on his sister's launcher, and Dragapult sent Sam a quick smile before shooting back up in the air. As a dragon type, ice cream was not in her interest, and she had taken to practicing close to the roof of the ice cream shop, instead. She wasn't truly practicing. She was just playing. At her brother's insistence, she was launching him short distances at high velocities, and each and every time, he let out a delighted scream. And it wasn't just him, a few Ghastly were involved too. As if she were some sort of theme park ride, the Ghastly were orderly lining up for the chance for Dragapult to launch them next. Your Pokémon are well trained. Sam blinked and brought his attention back to his mother to see that she was smiling at him. You're a good trainer. Thank you. But can I ask you a question? Her voice became serious, and Sam found himself awkwardly shifting around in his seat. With the ice cream gone, he no longer had any way to distract himself. Quietly, he replied with a sure. And his mother asked, why does it have to end? Why does what have to end? Sam repeated. No, I mean, why end? His mother continued. Why do you think that making a choice means all of this is going to stop? Why do you think that choosing a sponsor means your journey is going to be over? Even if this phase of your life is about to reach its conclusion, won't this all keep going? Won't your travels continue, even if you're not in Johto? I know. I know. Sam grumbled. It's just. I guess I'm just worried. I don't know what's going to happen next. And to that, his mother replied with a soft smile. So? Does that matter? I know you. You'll figure it out. It's not hard to imagine what you'll get up to. You'll see new ghost types. Encounter new people. Make so many more friends, and probably have a few adventures along the way. This might be the end, but it's only the end of your travels through Johto, she said. You still have an entire world to see. Even if this part of your life is over, there's still so much more to experience. I know, Sam said quietly, but if I do that, then that means I won't be going home. Delcatty jumped off her lap. Solemnly, Sam's mother leaned forward to rest a hand on his. I know, but it'll be okay. I had the chance to visit you here, and will always be rooting for you, no matter what. But what truly matters right now is the chance you've earned. You have all the freedom in the world to make the decision that makes you the happiest. Even if I. His mother nodded. Even if you go to Kanto, she finished for him. Sam blinked at her, mouth open, and she brought herself back to laugh. You saw through me that easily? Sam asked numbly. You're my son. Of course I did. As much as you have so many potential paths ahead of you, you still want to resolve everything with the new Pokédex, Sam could only let out a short laugh of disbelief as he thought back to that one paper contained in the packet. Between all of the various offers and requests, the one that had stood out the most was the letter containing nothing more than a basic invitation. I think, the other half of why I've been so stuck is because I don't actually have the information to make a decision yet, Sam said quietly, deep in thought. I haven't done any research. I've just been skimming through the offers. I need to figure out which companies I'd even want to consider giving my support, and I'd need to figure out which people I'd want to meet. And your first step? His mother asked, knowing that he'd already partially made up his mind. Before anything else, I'm going to have a conversation, Sam told her, looking her in the eye. Before I make any decision, I need to do something I've been putting off for some time. I really need to talk to someone I've already met, and I really need to figure out what I'm doing with the new Pokédex, like you said. So, I'm going to. Sam looked up at the sky. The sun was setting. Today was about to end. But even if today was almost over, tomorrow would still come just the same. He knew what he had to do. I'm going to Pallet Town, Sam declared. I'm going to meet with Professor Oak. There was one more conversation he needed to have, and he could no longer avoid it if he wanted to move on. Chapter 176. End Part 1. Sam caught a flight to Viridian City. It was the closest place with an airport near Pallet Town. Upon arrival, the difference between that Kanto city and most Johto cities became apparent almost immediately. While it did have a dense, modern downtown district, once Sam got past its tall skyscrapers, the rest of the place was rolling hills broken up by the occasional home. The road south was not anything special, being only a wide, dirt path that snaked through the terrain. It brought Sam past houses, gardens, groves, and even a tiny little booth of a building. Inside that building, a blue-haired officer napped, barely paying attention to her surroundings with how sleepy today was. Sam did not meander. His plane landed early in the morning, and he took the most direct path to his destination. It hardly took him any time to reach Pallet Town, which surprised him. Traveling down most routes generally took a few days, but he wasn't walking any which way his interest took him, and he didn't stop anywhere to train. The only time he paused was at the edge of a small river for lunch. He brought out his team and a pile of sandwiches he had picked up in Viridian, and they all ate together. Tiflosian sat with him while the rest of his team went through their usual nonsense, and they were watched by their surroundings. The wild Pokémon on this route were so weak and so used to humans that they didn't seem to comprehend the threat that his team posed. Some of the ghastly even purposefully let a pair of Rattata steal a sandwich just because they thought it was funny. But at the end of the meal, everyone helped Sam clean up, and he continued south, his shadow more restful now that the Pokémon within had gotten their fill. And then he was there. In Pallet Town. It wasn't even late afternoon. This area was so much like the lightly built upon hills of Viridian, except Pallet Town had ever so slightly more packed structures and a few streets where businesses had been built in a row. Immediately, Sam's eyes locked onto his destination, and he adjusted the straps of his backpack, feeling as though what he carried inside weighed 1,000 pounds. The hill the building was built on made the place higher than everywhere else, but it was not as though it was looming or thought itself above the rest of the town. Instead, its presence simply fit. This place was merely one more part of Pallet, one more mild point of interest, but one with an incredibly important person dwelling within. As Sam trudged toward the building, the gate that protected the stairs leading up was wide open, and he was just barely able to see through a grove of trees that blocked line of sight to the building's back. Pokémon of all types ran and relaxed. A small handful of people were out there with them, carrying buckets and boxes to clean up and bring food to the ranch behind this lab and home. A wind turbine in the back of the house cast a shadow over the place, but the building was no less bright for it. Upon arriving at the door, Sam had to take a deep breath. He reached into his pack to pull out a certain letter, and he debated pulling out something else as well, but he left it in there for now. Then, he knocked, and hurried footsteps echoed from inside. "Ah! My package," came a muffled voice. "I've been waiting for this all day." The noise increased in volume as the person within came closer and closer. Sam felt as though he couldn't move, and he briefly thought about just walking away. However, before he could truly entertain that idea, something clicked before him, and the door swung open wide. "Ah! You're not my package," that same voice said. The man started quiet but soon gained a soft smile. "Hello, Sam." "Hello, Sammy," Sam mumbled. "Can I come in?" "Of course. I invited you for a reason," Professor Oak said, stepping to the side to let Sam enter. The ground floor was filled with incomprehensible technological devices, but once they passed through a door on the second floor, Sam found that this place was rather homey. This wasn't just somewhere people came to do work, this was where Professor Oak lived. It was a combination of everything he stood for, but it wasn't just two separate places in one building. His life was his work, and his work was his life. There was a reason his lab and his home were one and the same. "Tea," came Professor Oak's voice from a small kitchen one room over. "I wouldn't mind some water," Sam called out. "Cold, if possible." "It'll be out in one moment." Sam walked to the side of this small living room and inspected the wooden shelves that lined the walls. Each and every one was covered with books related to Pokémon in some way, with many of those being thick tomes written by other researchers or compilations of poetry, but most were outdated versions of the written Pokédex published by Professor Oak. But there were a few framed photos, too. As Professor Oak hummed to himself in the other room, Sam found himself staring at the photographs placed on one shelf. These were front and center, the ones Professor Oak likely kept closest to his heart. He could see a picture of the man standing next to Mr. Pokémon placed off to the very side, but he could also see, boldly in the middle, a photo of Professor Oak standing behind a pair of kids. One kid had black hair and a bold smile, and the other had brown hair but a more serious expression. Despite their differences, they had their arms thrown over one another. Sam would have said they were rambunctious, but there was more to them than that. There was something familiar about them that he couldn't quite put his finger on. However, Sam didn't pay attention to that picture for very long. Near it was a somewhat faded photograph from years in the past. A younger version of Professor Oak stood with a group of smiling researchers dressed in lab coats and mostly casual clothing. Right away, Sam recognized a young Spencer Hale, but Sam's eyes also locked onto the familiar face half hidden in the back. "Grandpa," he breathed. "Did you know," Professor Oak said as he walked back into the room, carrying a tray of tea, ice-cold water, and a few cookies, "Richard once told me you were accidentally named after me. Apparently, he suggested the name Samuel as a joke, and your mother fell in love with the name without realizing just who it referenced." Sam grimaced. "I know," he said, turning back around. "My grandfather told me." Professor Oak just hummed, and he put the tray down. Sitting on a cushioned chair across from a low couch, he positioned a cup of tea on the table in front of him before completely ignoring it in favor of the cookies. He took a bite and looked up at Sam. "Try one. They're chocolate chip. Maybe later. I'm not the biggest fan of sweets." Professor Oak nodded in understanding, and Sam sat across from him, crossing his arms. He tried to stare at the older man, but his shadow churned. No matter how much he was trying to ignore it, his Pokémon were begging for another chance to eat. Eventually, he let out a sigh. "Do you mind if my Pokémon?" "Go ahead. All of the food I make is Pokémon safe." Although Professor Oak held one cookie with the rest still on the table, shadows suddenly swarmed out. A mass of darkness rushed out over the tray and even over Professor Oak himself. The swarm lasted only a second before pulling back, but every cookie was gone, even the partially eaten one had disappeared from Professor Oak's hand. But he just laughed, apparently used to Pokémon getting far too close and personal during his research. "Ah, well. Delia is always telling me I should diet, anyway." He then let out one more laugh. Professor Oak helped himself to his tea instead, adding a bit more sugar than he probably should have. Sam watched him, intentionally keeping on a serious face, and he honestly didn't know what to say. But there was one fact on his mind that he wasn't able to stop himself from blurting out. "I don't like you," Sam said. "Oh." Professor Oak raised an eyebrow but didn't react more than that. "That's okay. I don't expect everyone to like me. And I can't say we talked very much back then. No. It's... ugh. It's not related to any of that." Frustrated, Sam rubbed the side of his head. "My mom owns a bookstore. When I was growing up, people used to come in all the time to browse books about Pokémon and pick up the latest copy of the Pokédex. But when the electronic Pokédex came out, when that kind of information became more widespread, people stopped coming. The local gym stopped wanting to buy those books. Things started to get tough, but if the electronic Pokédex had just never come out..." Professor Oak put his teacup down. Sam gripped his hands on top of his knees. "It didn't need to be that hard. It was never that profitable, but I'd never seen Mom look so stressed," he said. No one was asking about information on Pokémon anymore, and Sam had to exhale. He hated what he was doing, but there was no sense in lying to himself anymore. "And that was probably due to a lot more than just the release of the electronic Pokédex," he said with a sigh, not wanting to admit it but recognizing he had no choice. "You were just the biggest name. You were the easiest person to blame." "It's all right," Professor Oak replied. "You can still blame me, if you want." Sam snapped up his head. "I can't say my work is harmless. I do it with the intent of good, of course. But there are always people and places unintentionally hurt by what I learn, and I'm not going to say it's all okay just for the sake of progress," Professor Oak said, morose. "There was one place, one family." He stared off into the distance, lost in thought, but then he closed his eyes and shook his head to refocus himself. Long story short, a certain discovery and a sudden rush of interest saw the Pokémon in a forest become enraged. The League had to step in to protect both the Pokémon and the people, but the damage had already been done. One home was destroyed, but that was an easy loss when compared to the safety of so many others, but that trade becomes less easy to justify when the hurt family shows up on your doorstep and blames you for everything they suffered through. "I'm sorry," Sam mumbled. "You don't need to apologize. That was years ago. I've taken great pains to prevent similar situations from cropping up, but I can't say I've been perfect," Professor Oak said. Sam was silent, and the man across from him took a sip of tea and looked up at him. Despite Sam's conflicted expression, Professor Oak sent him a smile as if trying to comfort him despite it being his story. Then, he put his teacup down. "Your grandfather was a very driven man." There was no more dancing around it. There was a reason Professor Oak was willing to invite Sam here. When he had his ideas, he always went through with them, and he was always quick to act, no matter the plan. When he moved to Hone, I wasn't surprised. After all, I never expected him to stay in one place for long. But then, he did, Professor Oak continued, his voice becoming soft. "We exchanged letters. We kept up. But he never moved again, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. Eventually, he stopped writing, and I did too, but I didn't think anything was wrong. I could have reached out, but I didn't. I was busy and assumed he was as well. When I heard the news of his passing, it shocked me. I never thought that those letters would be the last time you'd hear from him again," Sam finished. Professor Oak let out a slow exhale, and he replied with a sad nod, but this was a loss he had experienced years ago. This was not something he had gotten over likely, it was something he would never get over, but it was something he had learned to live with. He had already cried the tears he needed to cry. "Look," Sam said with a sigh, reaching into his backpack to pull out the item that was the reason he had come here in the first place. "I have this book." "Oh, new Pokédex." And Professor Oak's mood went through a complete turnaround as his eyes lit up. "I haven't seen that in years." "So, you found that in Richard's old stuff, did you?" Sam stared. Professor Oak stared back. The man held out a hand, and Sam couldn't stop himself from blurting out, "What? May I?" Professor Oak asked. Numbly, Sam passed the book to the most well-known researcher in the world. Skimming through it, Professor Oak flipped through the pages but never bothered to actually read it in any detail. He did not stop on even a single entry, rather, he just smiled to himself as he looked at the split-second images that appeared. There was a slight joy to him through those glances, but he eventually stopped and nodded as if the small bit he had seen was confirmation enough. He held the book out to hand it back over, and Sam cautiously took it, hardly understanding what was going on. "Have you?" "I haven't read it," Professor Oak answered. "But I will say it was quite the surprise to receive it in the mail. It was the last thing Richard ever sent me, an aged book being delivered right to my door. I looked through the first few entries, of course, and the attached note explained quite a bit, but once I realized what it was, I simply chose not to read it." "Why?" Sam asked immediately. "You're a Pokémon professor. You're the Pokémon professor. Isn't this the exact kind of stuff you want to see?" Calmly, Professor Oak took another sip of his tea, and he wore an amused expression on his face. He was acting far too casually for what he had just revealed, but he seemed to be enjoying Sam's flabbergasted reaction more than anything else. "Well, it'd be cheating, wouldn't it?" he asked. Sam stared at Professor Oak as if he were insane, and Professor Oak just let out a short laugh. He was definitely entertained by Sam's confusion, and Sam was definitely losing when it came to understanding whatever crazed thoughts were going through this man's mind. "I'm a researcher," Professor Oak said. "That's my role in life, I research. Richard always knew these impossible things that no one else did, but me? I want to know the explanations. I want to know more than just the what, I want to understand the why and the how. That book you have," Professor Oak continued. "Once I saw what it was, I knew the new Pokédex wasn't something I should ever read. It's knowledge that comes from elsewhere, and it skips straight to the end. If I followed it, I'd miss all the little, important discoveries that would come along the way. But it is worth reading," Sam blurted out. "There's so much that it contains that can help people and Pokémon. New evolutions can give Pokémon more energy to extend their lives, and those evolutions can give trainers more options for their teams. And the unknown moves in this those can help with more than just battle. Some moves can help with real-life jobs. All of that knowledge represents so much, and you just turned it down." "I did." Professor Oak took one last sip of his tea, and Sam was sent reeling. But the professor remained perfectly calm even as Sam felt as though he could barely keep his head up. "I want to learn more about Pokémon, and I want others to do the same," Professor Oak said. "I dream of a world where people and Pokémon live in harmony, and that's what I've dedicated my life to achieve. The papers and discoveries I publish aren't just about improving people's lives. They're about improving people's understanding. There's so much we stand to lose if we just skip straight to the end." He gave Sam a moment to process that, adjusting how he sat in his seat to ensure his full attention was on him. "Let me explain it to you this way," Professor Oak said, "I have a question I want you to think about. When you read through that book, was the new Pokédex's information the only thing that mattered for you, as a trainer?" It took Sam a few seconds to respond, and he did so alongside a breath. "No," Sam admitted. "It wasn't. The information inside let us know that Typhlosion could evolve, but we had to do so much just to understand how. And for Annihilape, even if his evolution method was straightforward, we still had to practice and figure out the move he needed to learn, and then we had to figure out how to master it in battle." "So," Professor Oak said. "If you had to do it again, would it take you anywhere as long?" "Ugh. Probably not." In response, a smile. "See? You have a little bit of researcher in you, you just had to think about it. Professor Oak cheered as he gestured toward Sam. But I'm sure you already understand. After all, there's more to the ghost type than just battle techniques, just like how there's more to research than just moves and evolutions. The process is what is important. It's about the journey just as much as it's about the destination. Right, Sam said tiredly. You're right. He and Professor Oak had both seen the new Pokédex, but they had viewed it from completely different angles. The information contained within had revealed to Sam what was possible, giving him a direct guide he could follow. Meanwhile, Professor Oak already believed that anything was possible. The new Pokédex would only be harmful to him, limiting, in a way. He didn't need a book that contained all of the answers if he truly believed that he and so many others would find them, anyway. It made Sam wonder how those differing mindsets applied to how they battled. He knew that Professor Oak was once strong enough to be the champion himself, and his reforms had reshaped both Kanto and Johto. However, he had stepped down to pursue the life of a researcher, yet he had continued to reshape the globe. But Sam still wanted to see just what Professor Oak could do. Sam mostly relied on plans as a trainer, but he wanted to see how Professor Oak would apply his sagely yet chaotic nature in a fight. Sam opened his mouth. So. He was interrupted when the front door of Professor Oak's lab opened and closed with a slam, and Professor Oak curiously tilted his head to the side. Someone on the lower floor grumbled and stomped up the stairs. The door to this living room was flung open as that person walked in, rubbing his spiked, brown hair as he did. Hey, Gramps. A shocked face looked up with blinking eyes. Oh. You have company. Again. I'll come back later. No. Come in. I have someone I'd like you to. TCH. It's all right, the boy said. Don't worry about me. Just have a good conversation, or whatever you're doing. Sam recognized the boy as an older version of the brown-haired kid from the picture, but he didn't get to see him for long. He quickly stepped out and closed the door to the room behind him. That same grumbling from before echoed out as the boy descended those same stairs, but rather than leaving out the front door, a different door was opened and closed. He seemed to have stormed out the back. That was Gary. My grandson, Professor Oak said. There was a melancholy to his voice that Sam didn't quite understand. And then, Sam realized just who had been next to Gary in that picture, and he was honestly surprised that he hadn't recognized him until now. Wait, so that Ash kid from the Ilex Forest is Gary's friend? And Professor Oak knows both of them? And he's a major adult in Ash's life? That's complicated. Yeah, I hate time travel. Some of Sam's thoughts must have leaked out onto his face because Professor Oak chuckled. My grandson has been helping me around the ranch, the professor explained. Ever since his parents. Well, he's living with me right now. He's due to start his journey this upcoming year, but I still can't help but worry, sometimes. Given he's related to you, he'll probably be okay, Sam said. His words came out more biting than he intended, but Professor Oak still gained a soft smile. But, as the world-famous researcher brought his eyes back to him, the man suddenly froze, and his expression lit up as if he had just come up with a brilliant idea. Say, Samuel, Professor Oak said slowly. After this, where do you plan to travel next season? Honestly, I haven't given it that much thought, but... Kanto, probably, Sam admitted. I'm already here, and I have a friend who lives in Vermilion. I want to meet back up with her. I see. Professor Oak nodded his head. And have you accepted any sponsorships yet? Not yet, Sam answered. I wanted to resolve everything with the new Pokédex first, but after this, I guess I'm keeping it. The new Pokédex is filled with information your grandfather knew, but don't feel like you have to hide it or keep it secret, Professor Oak said to him. It's your grandfather's, and you've inherited it from him. It's up to you to choose what you want to do with the information contained within. Yeah, I know, Sam said, sighing. I'm probably just going to release bits and pieces of it over time. Find someone to put out notes on the most useful moves. Maybe a few of the evolutions. Actually, probably most of the evolutions. With how those can help Pokémon in need, I care more about that than keeping any advantage in battle. Wise. And caring. Truthfully, I never fully learned just how much the book contains. But I will warn you that most won't believe what you release until the information is proven to be true. Sam shrugged. Hearing that bothered him less than he expected. That's fine, he said. As long as the information can help at least one person, I think. I can be happy with that. Sam might have said that, but Professor Oak was still watching him, and the man maintained a curious look on his face. To continue what I started before, Professor Oak said. So what, exactly, are you looking for in a sponsorship? Only now did alarm bells start going off in Sam's mind. Money, Sam said slowly, but that's just to help me keep being a trainer. Really, I want support. Help with purchases. Information or ways to meet new ghost types. Access to more unusual supplies. But the biggest would probably be ranching opportunities. I technically caught a tribe of Mankey that needs, somewhere, to stay. Somewhere like. Suddenly, his throat felt exceptionally dry. Somewhere like the ranch you have out back, Sam mumbled under his breath. Professor Oak just smiled. Sam, what if I don't want a sponsorship from you, Sam immediately interrupted. You wouldn't have given me this much focus if I was just some random trainer, and I don't want free stuff just because you knew my grandfather. He sat up taller as his confidence in his words grew. Yet, he continued, I want support for my team and somewhere for my extra Pokémon to stay, but I don't want that to happen just because of who I'm related to. I want it because someone recognizes us and decides they want to support us. Professor Oak nodded his head. That's all right. Then, instead of a sponsorship, how about an exchange? Suspicious, Sam watched the man, and Professor Oak started to clean up the few crumbs on the table that the Ghastly had left behind. Sam finally picked up the now warmer glass of water just so he could drink it and have an excuse not to speak. Instead of a full-fledged sponsorship, how about a simple deal? Professor Oak said. I have an entire ranch out back, and I'd be remiss not to give you that chance to use it. I would love to help you with your ranching problem if you are willing to travel with Gary next year. That's nepotism, Sam accused. Is it? I was already planning on asking someone to travel with Gary, and you have a very impressive resume. You're an experienced trainer, a trainer who managed to reach his conference's top 8 in his very first year, someone who managed to figure out not just one but 2 new evolutions. Only because of the new Pokédex. Professor Oak ignored him. And you're someone that I personally know is adept at handling emergency situations, Professor Oak added. The world-famous researcher crossed his hands, and he practically analyzed Sam's reaction. Sam couldn't forget that this man had once been the champion, and he couldn't forget that Oak's years of research meant he had literal decades of experience with observation. I don't want Gary to travel on his own, Professor Oak eventually said when Sam continued not to speak. I worry about him, sometimes. Both about how he feels and what others might do when they realize his familial connection. He has Eevee with him, and that is comforting, and he'll also have the right to choose a starter Pokémon, a right he earned all on his own. I know he'll do well, but I also want to make sure that he'll be safe and can grow. So, Sam, Professor Oak continued, his voice empathetic. Truthfully, I would have let you ranch your Pokémon here no matter what, but if you promise to travel with Gary, we can pretend that you're ranching your Pokémon here in exchange. Sam said nothing, and Professor Oak continued to watch him, but he still seemed just as amused by Sam's reactions as before. Of course, if that's still not enough, I can offer you the same deal I give to every trainer that comes to my door looking for help, Professor Oak said. Work on my ranch between seasons. Help me take care of the Pokémon that stay here. In exchange, when the next season starts, I'll ranch any extra Pokémon you send to me for free. And Gary? Sam asked. Regardless of whether you accept, I would still like for you to travel with Gary, but it's not a requirement. He needs more friends. Sam was quiet. He had planned to travel with Reedy again. Going with some kid named Gary and bringing him along wasn't anything he ever planned. He also had the weirdest sense that Ash wouldn't be a fan of him if he ever found out. But wasn't helping a new trainer a strong way to solidify what he already knew? Wasn't helping a new trainer mean he'd be doing exactly what he wanted to do? And he couldn't ignore Professor Oak's offer for ranching either, as much as he didn't want to lean on someone who was his grandfather's friend. While Professor Oak didn't bother with any luxury brands or treatment, his ranch was world-renowned for the quality of care the Pokémon in it received. It would be unfair to the Mankey if Sam turned him down. I'm not going to agree to anything without talking to Gary first, Sam said. But, fine. I guess I accept. Then, before Sam knew it, Professor Oak shot up to shake his hand. "Great," he said. "As intensive as it is, I find that working here is an incredibly informative experience. The amount one stands to learn by directly working with Pokémon can be mind-blowing. It's the core of my research, and the things I've learned." His words trailed off, and his shaking of Sam's hand slowed. Professor Oak gained a strange look in his eye and carefully pulled back. What?" Sam asked. "What is it?" "Sam," Professor Oak suddenly said, solemn. "If you're here, and if you're the one with the new Pokédex. It's been so long. I almost forgot. There's one thing you don't know." For some reason, the air felt cold, but that wasn't from any ghost. The chill in the room solely came from the seriousness that practically emanated from Professor Oak. "Through sheer forgetfulness alone, I haven't been completely honest with you," Professor Oak said, standing up and walking to a shelf. He trailed a finger to search through the book's spines. "Yes, I didn't read the new Pokédex, but only not in its entirety. I'd have been a fool to ignore everything within it, and there were a few species I read about. Just in case." "What species?" Sam asked cautiously. Professor Oak was quiet, and he pulled out a certain book. Sam could see from the date on its spine that this was the Pokédex published in the same year as his grandfather's death. "There are certain species of Pokémon out there that are powerful enough to be great threats," Professor Oak said as he opened the tome. "Species whose danger does not come from intentional actions, but from the sheer potential their existence can pose. You're familiar with one of them, Celebi. And let me ask you, did you see Celebi in the new Pokédex?" "No," Sam answered, "I didn't." Professor Oak's expression was halfway between a grimace and a frown. "I'm sorry. That's my fault. I removed certain pages. I was selfish. I thought the knowledge was too dangerous. Maybe I was wrong. But I still apologize, all the same." He opened the old Pokédex only to pull out a handful of loose papers hidden within. Sam could see their yellowed nature, but he could also see ever so slightly uneven cuts along all of their left edge. "Those are entries," Sam realized. "From the new Pokédex. You damaged his book." "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have," Professor Oak said. "But I can at least return these to you." "And what are they?" Sam asked as he took the gingerly offered pages. "Entries on certain species," Professor Oak answered without being specific. "Rare species." And, as Sam began to read through, he quickly realized just what every single entry described. "Legendary Pokémon," he breathed. Chapter 177. End Part 2. Professor Oak had told Sam that working on his ranch would be intensive, and the old man had been completely correct. Every day, hundreds of Pokémon had to be taken care of. Feeding, grooming, general property maintenance, all things that had to be done in person. Others helped out on Professor Oak's ranch, fellow trainers, permanent helpers, and a handful of temp assistants who worked with the Pokémon. Most of them were locals, but several were people who had been given the same offer as Sam. Practically everyone here attempted to do their job with gusto, but a handful of newcomers would start to help out only to disappear one day, not willing to continue this kind of near back-breaking labor. But Professor Oak did not solely rely on other people to care for these Pokémon for him. For just about every task that needed to be completed out back, Sam always found that Professor Oak was directly participating in the work. He was a researcher, but like he said, so much of what he learned came from observation. His ranch was more than just a ranch, it was a place where he could witness Pokémon live their lives in environments so close to their natural homes. At times, Sam would see the occasional extra visitor. Grumbling, Gary would walk out here when he thought no one else was looking, and he would try to help out with the Pokémon where he assumed no one could see him. If it wasn't him, then it would be Ash, who frequently tried to sneak out back. He'd creep around the lab to watch all of the Pokémon, but Professor Oak or someone else from the lab would catch him and send him home. His attitude was a bit too boisterous to be allowed out back without disturbing the Pokémon at rest. He also didn't have his Pikachu yet, which felt strange to Sam. With how close they had been in the Ilex forest, Sam would have thought they had grown up together, but apparently, Ash wouldn't catch it until he started his journey. Sam worked the ranch the best he could, as tiring as it was, and he stayed in a guest room in Professor Oak's home. Over the weeks, he kept in contact with his friends and learned what they were up to. Xavier had already left Sinnoh for Hone, wanting to get a bit of exploration in before the start of the next season. Reedy, meanwhile, was having a great time in Vermilion, and she was still advertising her parents' business. As it turned out, having a Dragonite help them with their work was attracting a lot of attention. Then, Morty had his battle. He fought Lance privately. Somewhere hidden within the League's Indigo Plateau, he had had a battle for the ages against the champion himself. However, Sam was not able to watch it. Lance had not given anyone permission, not even to Agatha herself. Morty lost. But Lance had walked out of that battle shaken. Morty had gotten closer to a victory than Lance had ever expected. As for Sam's team, they mostly just hung out on the ranch, but they never stopped training. Typhlosion helped him with the menial labor, alongside Miss Magius, but Gengar would float off and around, playing tricks on all of the varieties of Pokémon. Anilope started to spend more and more time with his tribe and brother, too. Upon being sent here, the Mankey tribe had explored the place within only a few days, and led by their Primeape leader, they claimed a rocky cliffs cave in the far back. Dragapult, however, would leave for days at a time. Professor Oak's ranch consisted of acres upon acres of land, and the speed at which she flew let her cross the space within minutes. Apparently, a weathered, old Dragonite lived in the mountains that framed the ranch's back, and Professor Oak hinted to Dragapult that she should visit. Sam never saw what she did there, but whenever she came back, she and Dreepy always looked bruised and battered. But they kept heading there, and Sam had a feeling that Dragapult wouldn't give up until she won in their fight. However, she was a Dragapult, and she only had one Dreepy with her, a great disadvantage for her species. Both her combat prowess and flight itself were limited by that lopsided potential. For this, Sam did lean on Professor Oak, but that was only because he didn't have any other choice. Through Professor Oak's contacts in Galar, Sam was able to make a connection to an up-and-coming trainer named Rayhan. They came to a simple deal that stated that as soon as Sam caught a specific Pokémon that Rayhan wanted, Rayhan would trade for it to bring over another Dreepy for Dragapult. And then, there was the last member of Sam's team. Trevenant was no longer with Sam, but it was not that Trevenant had been released. Instead, his mother was doing a bit of construction around the bookstore, and Trevenant had expressed interest in helping out. Thus, Trevenant was temporarily staying in Dewford, all the way back home. However, all of this had taken place over a period of weeks. The 2 months between the end of Johto's season and the start of Kanto's passed in the blink of an eye. When Sam woke up the morning of the very first day of the year, he quickly got ready and gathered all of his stuff as fast as he could. Despite spending so much time taking care of the Pokémon here, he felt energized and ready to leave. But he ended up waiting in that same, small living room within the second floor of Professor Oak's lab. From behind a cracked open door, Sam listened to the aged researcher's voice echoing out from below. Professor Oak gave a dramatic speech about duty, responsibility, trust, and the power of friendship. The oohs and ahs that came from everyone around him made Sam quietly laugh. The sheer weight that Professor Oak's words carried meant that every new trainer here listened with rapt attention, all of them except for Gary. That boy just scoffed. I can't believe he actually agreed to travel with us, Sam whispered to the air. I mean, it felt like he was brushing us off, but he accepted so quickly. I expected more of a fight. At his side, Typhlosion snorted. She didn't have anything pleasant to say. She wasn't the biggest fan of the type of person Gary tried to be. It'll be all right, Typhlosion. Gary acts a bit full of himself, but I don't believe he's really like that, Sam said. He just has big shoes to fill. I mean, think about who he's related to. More often than not, people see him as Gary Oak instead of just Gary. Sam got the familiar sense that Gary acted like that because he felt as though he had something to prove. I do wonder what Pokémon he'll choose down there, Sam said quietly to his team. Gary's pretty hot-headed, so I'm thinking maybe a Charmander. As that question hung, a cackle came from Sam's side, but it wasn't a noise from Typhlosion. Yeah, Sam replied. Think what you want to think. You've never met him, but Gary kind of reminds me of Xavier. I want to help and make sure he gets more confidence, but even if I can't do that, I at least have someone I can call for advice. Sabai didn't care. He just wanted to get a move on. This whole process of waiting for everything to finish was just delaying what he wanted to do. And Sabai wanted to get stronger. He had seen Sam's team, and he had become insanely jealous. For all of the training Sam's mother had done with him in the past year, Sabai had gotten stronger, but she only had so much time to spend training him each day. So, since Trevenant was currently back home helping his mother, Sam would be traveling with Sabai. But no pranks, Sam said, bringing up a finger. Sabai grumbled, and even Sam's shadow rumbled in displeasure. Okay, fine. You can have a few pranks, but none like what you did to me in Granite Cave. To that, Sabai cackled, but the noise quickly stopped when Miss Magius appeared behind him just to bonk him on the head. Hearing everything begin to wind down below, Sam returned Sabai and Typhlosion as all of the young trainers met with their first Pokémon. The sound of various Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle rang out, and Professor Oak wished all of them luck as they all started to rush outside. None wanted to wait to start their journey. Sam poked his head into the room. Is that everyone? Yes. You can come out now, Sam, Professor Oak called out. And Gary? Sam asked as he left the room. Picked up a serious little Squirtle, which was a surprise to me. Professor Oak was busy grabbing the last few Pokeballs on the table that contained the other starter Pokemon that hadn't been selected. For now, they were all put away, but they'd soon be sent to other cities to be given out as starters for other new trainers as well. I didn't hear Ash, Sam said. Did he not come? Professor Oak gained a mischievous smile, which didn't quite fit on his face. The expression reminded Sam of just a few days ago, when Professor Oak had strode back into his lab, grinning and talking about how he had just caught a certain yellow rodent chewing on wires out back. Knowing Ash, he'll be here soon, Professor Oak said. Delia always complains about how he forgets to set or sleeps through his alarms. Sam helped Professor Oak clean up, and pretty soon, the only Pokeballs left were a trio of empty ones. Given that he knew Professor Oak still had a few starter Pokemon left, Sam was pretty sure these were meant to be a pretense for Professor Oak to give Pikachu to Ash. I guess I could wait for him, but Gary already stepped out, and there's no telling how late Ash'll be, Sam said. Oh, yes. Professor Oak said. There's no sense in keeping you waiting, but I do have a gut feeling that Ash will be here soon. Looking up from where he was typing a message to another professor, Professor Oak sent Sam a small smile. Treat Gary well, yes. Outside, Sam could hear the sounds of all of the new trainers chatting animatedly, but also a car. Apparently, one of the new trainers was getting a ride to their first stop, which was a shame. They'd be missing out on traveling down their first route. I will, Sam promised him. I figure I'll let him choose where we head first, but I'll probably make sure we don't take too long to reach Vermilion. My friend is waiting for me to show up at her place before she leaves home, and given just who she is, I think Gary will benefit from having more than one type of trainer with him, too. Professor Oak laughed approvingly. Smart. It also reminds me of a certain poem. Now, how does it go? As soon as Oak said that, Sam stepped back toward the door as fast as he could without being suspicious. It's all right, he said quickly. I actually think I should head out now. I bet Gary is already annoyed about waiting for me, and if we're fast enough, I want to see if I can take on Viridian's gym by the end of the day. Oh, facing all of the gym leaders' core teams? An experienced trainer's challenge. And a tough one, at that. Professor Oak called out, and Sam paused as he put his hand on the door's handle. I wish you the best of luck in all of your battles, Sam, but I'll also warn you that Kanto's gym leaders are tougher than they look. But, most of them already look tough enough. He laughed again. Although, it might be worth paying extra attention to a few other rumors, too, Professor Oak mused. But I have a feeling I don't need to say much more than that. If you ever hear the name, Scott. I'll keep an ear out, Sam said. If this is a rumor being shared by the great Professor Oak. Professor Oak winked an eye. Sam was about to step outside. He could hear an argument taking place just past the front doors, probably a pair of trainers forcing a fight to set up their first battle. However, just as Sam was about to leave, Professor Oak called out for one last thing. And his voice was deathly serious. Keep an eye out for Team Rocket. Sam turned around to look Professor Oak in the eye. Trust me, I will. Then, Sam slipped outside while no one was paying attention. He froze when he saw the scene playing out ahead of him. Ash was right there, glaring at Gary, and, as it turned out, Gary was the one in the car. Except, he wasn't alone. The kid was surrounded by an entire team of cheerleaders chanting his name. Sam had known Gary had been given a budget by Professor Oak, but he had never expected Gary to spend it all on something like this. Well, Ash, you snooze, you lose, and you're way behind right from the start. Gary shouted. Ash glared at the other boy as their argument continued, and Sam was effectively locked in place. That's really why he accepted so easily. Sam whispered in disbelief. Because he had a getaway plan since the start. Before hardly any more time passed, Gary drove off, leaving both Ash and Sam behind. Ash was far too busy grumbling to notice Sam as Professor Oak invited him inside. The other new trainers all slowly filed away to start their travels, and Sam was left alone on Professor Oak's front steps. Well, he was left only mostly alone. He still had his team under his feet. I guess this is really how we're going to start the season, trying to catch up to a car driving off into the distance, Sam said into the air. It's going to be interesting, but I'm looking forward to it. Beneath him, his shadow rumbled in agreement. So, we need to grab Gary, take on a few gyms, and then catch up to Reedy, Sam continued, thinking out loud. All the while, we'll continue to train, fight impossible fights, and get ready for any challenge that comes our way. The sun was high in the sky, and the late morning day was bright. Even Ash's shouts of pain from being shocked inside couldn't ruin this moment for Sam. It's going to be fun, he said. The dust cloud following Gary's car was nothing more than a speck in the distance, but to start heading after him, Sam needed to take the first step. His foot hit the ground. His time in Johto might have been over, but he had appreciated every moment of it. Now, as the new season started, his time in Kanto was just beginning. Sam's journey continued on.